Hi, my name is Shellie Searcy, and I want to tell you my story. She was 11 years older than my dad, and she had had seven siblings before me, so I was going to be her eighth kid and her third marriage. And my dad had was her third marriage, and my dad had was she forced my dad to marry her because she was pregnant with me, and he was 18 years old. No, he was 21, excuse me, because she was 32. And as I was growing up, everything was great. I was a daddy's girl, and then at the age of 10, things just changed. So usually my mom and dad both worked, so us kids had to take care of each other. I was about 11 years old at this time, and I had a kid brother and a kid sister. My kid sister is a year younger than me, and then my kid brother is a year younger than her. So we're stair steppers, and we're left at home way out in Peach Creek, Texas, and uh, we're there doing house chores, and I happened to be in the back bedroom, my mom and dad's bedroom, folding clothes. And my dad came in off the road. He was a truck driver, and he came in the door and he asked us where our mom was. We said she was at work at the hospital. And my dad, all of a sudden, he just came straight in, and he just kept coming closer and closer to me, and I kept moving over down the bed line, folding clothes, trying to just keep him in my peripheral vision because something was weird, it was off about him. And then the next thing I knew was he had my hair. I had long hair, and he had it all wrapped up in his hand, and he was jerking my head back, and he was trying to force a kiss in my mouth. And I thought, what are you doing, and I thought, this is gross. And I kept pulling back away, and then he just slapped me, and I fell across the bed. When I did, my dad was a 5 foot tall, broad Mexican man that was fat. So he had a 54-inch waist belt. So when I fell in the bed, he fell on top of me, and he started trying to shove his tongue in my mouth, and he kept trying to get me to comply with him. And I just wouldn't do it. I fought and I fought. I was this little bitty, skinny, fragile little thing. But I was wiry. I could wiggle out away from him because I wrestled with my brothers a lot. And I got out from underneath him, and he caught me by my hair and threw me into a wall. And I fell down. I got back up. I crawled down the hallway a ways, and I got up. When I got to the kitchen sink, my kid brother Mikey was doing dishes, and I could hear my dad coming thundering down the hallway. And I reached into the sink, and the first thing I grabbed was this butcher knife. And I held it in the suds just above the water a little bit where I could see what I had in my hand. And he came around, it was a single wide trailer. He came down the hallway, and as soon as he got in the kitchen, he saw I had my hand in the sink, and he said, "What do you have in your hand?" My kid brother Mikey started whispering to me, "Put it down, put it down, put down, put down." My kid brother told me to put the knife down. And I turned around, and my father, he came to me, and he grabbed me by my head, and he pulled my hair back into the sink, and he told me, he said that he brought life into me. He could take life out of me. And I had no doubt that he was going to do that. But I knew at that moment, for the rest of my life, I was going to have to fight the man who I thought was, better than gold. He was my father, for God's sakes. And now I'm having to think about him in a different light, which changed my whole perception in life. And from then on, anytime my dad come home, my stomach would get sick. My kid brother's stomach would get sick. All of us kids knew that if he came home and even found a fuzz ball on the floor, that he would just start whooping us from the oldest to the youngest, and he would just make us take our pants off down to our panties, and he would just, beat us with that belt. And wherever the belt went, whether it was our backs, our necks, our legs, our arms, wherever, my dad did that to us. Well, for many years and all, that was how we portrayed my dad. When my dad come home, that's how he was. And that went on most of my childhood, most of my teens and stuff, until the one fatal time my sister had gotten married, and my dad had me go out with a friend's son who was an alcoholic. And my dad was trying to just, be the big shot and say, yeah, want my daughter to go out with your son, that kind of thing. And I really didn't even know the guy. He was older than me and everything. He wasn't even in school. And I was like barely, 14, 15 years old. And so his mom said, yeah, we're going out dancing at the dance hall. I'll take her with us and Keith will be there. And my dad said, yeah, go ahead and do that. Well, as the night progressed, the mother got me into drinking some cherry vodka. And I drank whiskey before, trying to cope with all the whelps and bruises my dad put on my body. But I hadn't drank no cherry vodka, and that was a whole different ballpark. But when the guy brought me home, he brought me home 30 minutes late, and my dad was sitting up in the living room. When we came in the door, he saw my dad. He turned around, made about face, and left. And I came in, and my dad saw me, took one look at me, and started yelling at me. But I started feeling sick to my stomach, like I had to throw up. So I took off running down the hallway, which was another single wide trailer. And my dad went chasing me. And when we got to the bathroom, I started throwing up, and it was like these clots, looked like blood clots, but I guess it was the cherry vodka coming back up. And I was sitting there in the sink thinking, while he was banging on the door, I was thinking, I'm not opening that door. He'll kill me. And I knew he would. I could tell by his anger. And then finally, I just opened the door. And when I did, a punch went straight to the side of my temple. And I landed all the way into the bathtub. While he had me in the bathtub, he turned on the water, and he was holding me by my throat and holding me down, trying to choke me, saying that, that I must have had sex with this boy, and I must have, been doing this and that I was a whore. I was everything, slutty. I was just everything. And I remember I felt like I was drowning and all, and I started kicking my feet and wailing my arms and reaching up, to claw him, to do anything to get away from him. And my foot actually came up out of the bathtub and hit him right in the groin area, right in the area there. And he went backwards holding himself. And I jumped out of the tub and went running down the hall. And when I did, he grabbed my long hair and spun me around and hit me. That was the first break to my nose. Then I hit the floor and bounced off, and I heard my nose crunch. And then when it finally hit and laid, I heard the other break come up, and it actually straightened out my nose at that point. And for years, well, let's back up. After that, my dad, so a little background about my high schooling. Um, ever since that had happened with me, my dad, I was always a fighter. I didn't pick a fight, I didn't start a fight, but anytime I seen someone picking on a smaller kid or something, I went up and I took up for that kid and everything. And it landed me in the dean's office a lot. And that's how the dean got to know me personally and all. By the time I got into high school and all, I had met I played volleyball for the high school, for Conroe High, and I played softball for the county. And I was really good at sports, and I was really good at anything I put my hands to, whatever I did. I was good with my schoolwork and everything, but I just had an attitude problem. I had a real bad attitude about, just people who bullied anybody. I didn't like bullying, and so it got me in a lot of trouble doing that. I was a lot of times drink before school. I had older people that would buy alcohol and leave it behind the air conditioner at DC's drive-in. And when I got off at work at night, I would had it there till the morning. And then whoever gave me a ride to school, we would go by there and we would pick up the alcohol. And all of us kids would be drinking alcohol with big cups of soda water and ice all the way to school, and we would go mudding and doing everything else, going crazy before we even got to school. So half the time we all looked like a bunch of ruggerats running up in there, muddy, dirty, whatever. And that really didn't make the principal happy about us doing that either. So I got put in after school detention. I got put in school detention. At one point, my coach talked to the counselor about, instead of putting me in detention, to put me on the track team for Conroe High. Well, I'm 4'5" at this time, but I could jump up to spike a volleyball, but I couldn't jump over a hurdle. And every time they had me run, I would run and hit every hurdle. Boom, 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 every one of them down. So then they found out I was a professional runner, and they said, you're going to run cross country. And I ran cross country for about one season, and then they let me get off of that and told me I didn't have to stay on that team, because I really like running in softball and volleyball, like moving, but I didn't like cross country. So the coaches took me back, and the coaches really coddled me. They really talked to me. They tried to be my big supporters, and because they knew what was going on at home. Coach Spears for Conroe High, she was my coach at the county playing softball. She seen my dad come up there and him treat me bad and slap me and stuff, because everybody had to play. And this one little girl, she couldn't catch, she couldn't throw a ball, she couldn't hit, but her mom and daddy paid for her money for her to pay. And I told them, here, let her play this inning and I'll go. Well, when my dad got there, the only game he ever came to, this is a 3-day tournament. This little girl's been on the bench 2 solid games. This is the 3rd game and the last game of the tournament, and she's still on the bench, and she's still cheering us on. And I couldn't stand it no more. I told Coach Spears, let her run. Let her run. Okay, I'll bat, you let her run for me. I made up an excuse that something was going on with my ankle and I couldn't run. Coach Spears said, okay. So she went ahead and she had when I hit the ball, had the girl run to first base. And of course she got put out because she was a slow runner. And my dad had saw this, and he saw me sitting on the bench, come back and sit on the bench. And he wanted to know why I wasn't up running. You're my daughter. You're supposed to be, the best at everything. And I was thinking, you never come to none of my games. You never go to my volleyball games, my softball games, nowhere. You're never there for me. How can you come to one game and say anything? But instead, because I was scared of him, I didn't say nothing. And he reached through the fence and he grabbed a hold of my waist and he pinched it so hard that whenever I went home and I went to change out my clothes and take a shower, there was blood blisters, bruised up blood blisters on my stomach, on my side. And you got to remember, I was about 4'5", and I didn't even weigh 80 pounds. I was real skinny. So that bruise was a huge bruise. And I hated my dad for that. I mean, I truly had true hatred in my heart for him, for the way that he, didn't ask questions. He just decided he'd do that. And, at one point, his own mother, thought she saw a kid in town on a bike when I should have been in school, and told my dad it was me. And my dad beat the living hell out of me. Then took me to the school the next day, only to find out I hadn't skipped school. It wasn't me. It was another kid. He never apologized or nothing. He turned around and walked out. The dean asked me then, Dean Kruger asked me then, Shellie, are you okay at home? And I looked at him and I said, what's it to you? You never believed in me before, so I ain't going to tell you nothing now. And I turned and walked out of his office. And that's just how I dealt with life. I just dealt with life. Well, if you can't help me, don't hinder me. Don't step in my way. I'm not answering a bunch of questions. And um, so when we got from there and everything and all, I ended up meeting this boy. I'm not going to mention his name because his family's still a prominent name in Conroe, I believe. But I had ran away from home, and it was raining, pouring down rain, and I ran, and I called him from a payphone, and he said, "Come on, come to my house. My parents aren't home. They're elk hunting. Come on, come over here." So I came to his house, and I was sobbing wet. So he had me, gave me one of his shirts, a button-down white shirt to put on, and he said, "Come on, lay over here by the covers by me, and I'll warm you up." The boy got on top of me, and I don't know how it happened, but a few seconds later, felt something squiggle up in my body, a sensation I had not ever felt. And I jumped up, and I stood up, and I knew at that minute I was pregnant. And I carried my daughter at the time for about 13 weeks. And then my adopted mother, because I got adopted parents, I got taken out of my house. And so as I'm laying there on the floor, my mom jumps out the back door of the trailer, and she runs to get my Uncle Wayne, which lives in a trailer behind us, which is my dad's brother, to come get my dad off of me because she believes my dad is killing me because I'm a bloody mess, and I'm right there at the front door, so she can't get out the front door. So she jumps out the back. By that time, he grabs me up by my hair, pulls me, like dragging me almost through the living room and the kitchen, sets me down in a chair. And I'm sitting there looking at him, and my head is wobbling, my jaw is wobbling, and my face is swelling up, and I feel all this pressure. And my Uncle Wayne comes running through the front door, and he hears me tell my dad, "Why don't you just kill me? Finish me off. If you finish me off, then the cops will have to get involved, and then they'll know just what kind of a monster you are." And my Uncle Wayne says, "Shellie, what are you doing? Don't tell him to hit you no more." And I said, "Uncle Wayne, why don't you tell me why your kids can't stay the night at our house?" And my Uncle Wayne just freezes because the family knows, but nobody wants to go against him to help us kids. They don't want to get involved with us kids. And so we turn around, and I'm sitting there at the table, and he yells for my mother to go and get some bandages and clean me up. The next day, he has me get up and get dressed and go to school. And he sends a note. He tells my mom to write a note saying I was in a bad car accident. And that's why I look the way I look. But when I got there, you know, my dean and my teachers, they knew me very well, and they knew something was going on. They knew I was being abused at home, but they didn't have no proof, so they couldn't do nothing. The school wasn't going to get involved. Conroe High was not going to get involved. Mr. Figueri was the principal then, and he was trying to make a name for himself. So therefore, I'm considered trash because I'm not donating money to my family. Ain't donating money to Conroe High. So he just wants to rub this under the covers. More say go throw it under the rug, get rid of me, do whatever. Put me somewhere where other people don't have to see me with bandages, on my face and stuff. I never went to the hospital. My mom was a nurse. So, that's what she did. She did the best she could. Years later, after I, okay, so before I found out I was pregnant from this person, I was still living at home. And my brother Bobby had come over, and my dad had been pressuring me every night, putting serrated edge knives to my throat, telling me if I told anybody what he was doing in the household, raping my sisters or beating my mother or beating us kids, that he would kill me. And my brother Bobby was tired of my father, which wasn't his father, but he was tired of the way he was treating me. And so he had come and got me and took me up to the police department. In the police department in Conroe, they were taking a video of all my bruises and markings on my bodies that my father had put on my body. And as they were doing that, I was standing up the wall like this in bra and panties, 14, 15 years old. And all of a sudden I heard, "Look at the shitter on that critter." And I turned around and all I saw was this plate glass window. And I said, "You're no better than my father." Well, they told my brother that they had to take me in a police car to the hospital to have a test to see if I'd been a rape kit. And I kept telling him, "My dad didn't rape me. He didn't rape me. It was my sister. He didn't rape me. He was raping my sister." And the police said, "We still got to do a rape kit." So when I got there, the doctor, you know, he's so the police take me to the hospital. And at this time, they have this doctor come in, and this man's hands they're huge. They're like football player huge. And this man, he had no couth about him. He had no finesse about him. He just came in and just like moved me where he needed me to move. And when he lunged his fingers inside, I actually started bleeding from it and stuff and all. And then when I got up, I was real sore and all, and I had to use the bathroom. And when I was in the bathroom, I decided, I know how to run out of this hospital. And so I ran out of the emergency room, ran down the hall, ran downstairs, used the payphone by the doors, and I called my best friend's parents, Ruby Joe, and I said, I need you to come get me. And she just got in the truck and came, got me, no questions asked. And on the way home, she was asking me what was going on, and I told her. And well, the police decided I couldn't stay at my house no more since I turned my dad in. And my brother Bobby was a police officer. He was a rookie on the force. So now they awarded me to stay with him. Well, 2 weeks into staying with him, my dad started throwing bricks through their apartment windows, and they had two small kids. And my sister-in-law, to this day, it broke her heart that she told me I had to find someplace else to live. So the next day I go to school, and there's my principal, a judge, my brother, and of course, there was somebody else. There was a clerk from the judge's office and all, and they're trying to find a place for me to be. They're trying to find a place for me to go. And the Buckner house was too full. That's for wayward kids. And I wasn't in trouble with the law, but there was nowhere else to put me but juvenile hall. And my brother Bobby said, "No, she doesn't deserve to go there. She's working on softball scholarship. She does good at grades in school. She just has a attitude problem, And so they asked me, they said, "Is there anybody else you could call?" So I called Ruby Joe. And of course, Larry Cockrell, he answered the phone, which owned Larry's Auto Interiors in South Fraser. And I said, "Dad," because that's what I called him. I said, "They need me to find a place to live. I'm in here in the principal's office." And I heard him say, "Ruby Joe, go get your daughter." And out the door she went, and in the door she walked. She didn't ask questions or nothing. She walked in there. She said, "Where do I sign?" And when she signed me, she said, "I'm taking her out of here the rest of the day, and I'm taking my other daughter, Midge," which was my best friend since I was 5 years old. And she took us both out and took us both up to the shop. And my adopted dad said, "You're ours now." She signed them papers. They were the papers. What was they called back in the day? Emancipation, not emancipation, but where a kid, if they were at the certain age and they had a family member that could vouch that they could go live with somebody else until they could graduate. And what was it? Yeah. So they gave me that, and I went and lived with them. And while I was living with them, my adopted mom, I was telling her I couldn't keep this baby because I was pregnant by this guy. And she was telling me about drinking herbal tea to help miscarriage. And I didn't know the Lord. I didn't know God like that. And I really didn't know Jesus. So I drank the tea. And one night while being out with them, because they like to go out dancing and partying all the time, and they would have me and Midge, who were underage, who didn't even have a driver's license, drive them home, from the bars and all. And when I was out with them one night, I started miscarrying and all. And so Midge drove me home. And when she drove me home, my adopted mom came too. And I never forget sitting on the toilet opposite from me on the wall was this big old mirror, and all I seen was just blood fill up everywhere and run down my legs. And I thought to myself, I'm dying. And my adopted mom scooped out the fetus, and they knew some people. They knew a doctor in 1960 that did abortions. And he told her that since I was underage, but I was her daughter, I'd have to sign in under another name and come up there, and he'd do the DNC in the office without anybody knowing, asking questions. So when I got up there, I went under the name Pearl Smith. They told me the baby was a girl, and to this day, I talk about her as Pearl Smith. Her name is Pearl Smith. I gave that fetus a name because I really and truly didn't even know what was going on with my hormones, what was going on with me. I didn't know how to process it. I got back to the house, and I'm laying across the bed, and I get a phone call from the boy's mother. And she gets on the phone and starts reprimanding me, telling me I can't keep this bastard child, that I got to get rid of it, that her family is not going to raise no bastard and this and that. And I told her I had a DNC this morning, and I hung up on her because I didn't know her nothing. I didn't know her nothing. It wasn't long after that the boy called me, and now he wants to be a father and all this. And I told him, I said, it's over. I said, it's over. And I kept saying the words, it's over, because I was in so much pain afterwards, after the DNC, that I didn't even want to talk to him. I hated him. Here's another form of hatred that I got. And so I hung up on him. And I told my best friend, I said, I said, I couldn't have had that kid if I wanted to. I said, because I don't even want kids right now. I didn't even know how to love myself. I just came there from my father's house, and but over the years, I've often thought, what would that baby have been like? What would she? I was fixing to be 16. I was at the end of my 15 year. I was fixing to be 16, and I'll never forget the feeling of just remorse and agony I had after the DNC, and it wasn't because of the DNC, it was because of the baby. And so my older sister found out about it, and she found out I went to an abortion clinic, and so she assumed I had an abortion all these years. It wasn't until recently that she really sat down and heard me and said, oh wow, I didn't know it was all like that. And I said, yeah. Well, about I had to go for a 6 weeks check, and the boy's mother wanted to drive me down to 1960 for the 6 week check. And I agreed to let her, because I wanted her to know for real that I didn't have a kid in me no more. I didn't have a bastard child in me no more. She didn't have to worry about her namesake. Back when I was growing up, people were always worried about their namesake. Your name is all you got. If you say you're going to do something for somebody, you better go and do it. And so I let her go down there, and I let her listen. And I didn't let her go in the room when they did the checkup, but I let her listen. And she asked me on the way home, she said, well, I'm glad you got rid of that problem. I didn't want that problem. I said, her name is Pearl Smith. Don't you ever mutter out of your mouth again nothing about this baby without calling her by her name. And she just shut up, and she sat there in her Eldorado Cadillac and just drove quietly all the way back till she dropped me off on 2854. And I never seen them people again till later on in my life. I seen him again, but it wasn't a nice situation, because he was at a bar, and when we drove up, he was peeing in the parking lot, and he had zipped himself in the parking lot, zipped himself up. And so now he's drunk. He doesn't realize who I am, telling me to go tell his wife to come out to the parking lot to help him. And I'm laughing because I'm like, I almost mentioned his name, but I said, "Boy, don't you remember who I am?" He said, "No." I said, "Oh my God, he's still getting drunk. You know, this boy's still drinking after all these years." And I was glad that I did go in and tell his wife to come help him, but I didn't tell him who I was. I didn't tell her who I was because I'm not getting in the middle of no husband wife drama, you know. I bartended in Conroe, you know, and I knew a lot of people. I knew a lot of people's dirt and all. And anytime a wife or girlfriend called up there looking for their husbands, I'd say, "Come and see." Come and see. And they knew if I said come and see, they were in the building. So they just come on up. I tell them, "I can't keep up with your husband. I ain't got one of my own. I ain't keeping up with yours. You better come see." And every time they catch them there, and I'd be like laughing, watching them drag them out of the bar. I just laugh. I said, "Woo, they got busted again." You know, and I grew up, you know, in bars, you must say, with my adopted parents going out and partying all the time. They were swingers, you know, and so after every one of their parties or whatever at the house, me and Midge had to clean up the pool, the pot, hot tubs, everything, you know, and see things I never in my life thought I'd ever see, you know, and you know, and the funny things, you know, because I guess I was just so I wasn't used to all that, you know, all the gadgets and stuff that they had. And so Midge would tell me, "Put it down." I'd be like, "What is this?" And she'd say, "Put it down." And the family was really good to me. I got some on my glasses. Let me take it off. Um, the My adopted mom and dad, they were super good people. I remember my first Christmas with them. I went with Ruby Joe to the boot barn, you know, to buy. We were buying Wranglers and we were buying boots and belts and all for Christmas for people in the family. And she said, "What do you want?" And I looked over and there was these hot pink Roper boots. And the lady at the boot barn, she said, "Those are the only pair we have. We can't sell them. Nobody wants them." I said, "I do." She said, "Do you want them boots?" I said, "I want them boots." She goes, "Good, that's your Christmas gift." And these were $100 pair of boots. My other mama had been raising us up in hand-me-downs and fire sale clothes, which is like garage sale clothes or knockoff price clothes. You know, I never had nothing brand new, nothing shiny like that. And I wore them boots to school. I mean, I wore them with everything. I wore them with my Wrangler jeans and my Hard Rock t-shirts, you know, because I was like a rock and roller Hall of Fame, you know. I rodeoed, I did barrel racing and all for a little while. Could have went professional, but didn't have the money, so you know I didn't. Um, um, well, it started when I lived at home with my parents. I was always going to the neighbor's house for an agricultural prop. I had to do an agricultural thing with an animal, and so I would go over there and ride their horses and all. Well, my dad ended up buying me a horse, but this horse was unruly. He was like half Welsh and or half Shetland pony and half quarter horse. You know, his bloodline did not match and meet, and he was unruly. So the man and woman down the road, their little spoiled daughter come out on the summers, but they need someone to ride the horses during the week to keep him, you know, used to someone riding him. And so me and my best friend Stacy Taylor decided we would ride this horse. And as I was riding this horse home one day, um, uh, he kind of went wild, and he was coming down Exxon Road. Is a steep hill. It's an old logging hill. And he took me down that road. And I mean, he was going with everything he had, like a racehorse. And then he veered off into the ditches and all. And he was going, weaving in and out of the lines, you know, from the telephone poles, how the wire comes down to the ground and all. And all. He was weaving through that. And then when he got to his house, he just jumped over the cattle guard. I mean, he just jumped over it with me on it. And the people seen it, and so they got in the truck and they went driving, trying to get close enough to me. They're going to pull me into the back of the truck off the horse. And when they did, the horse cut quick to the left, and I hit the side of the truck and broke a couple of ribs. But after I healed up from that, I started barrel racing with this lady down the road, Joanne Hobbs. And she was real, I mean, she was on the circuit, I believe, at the time. And also, she was training me on one of her ponies and stuff. And one of her, what we call ponies, they were horses that were not qualified for track yet. But so they would do barrel racing. They would do like roping or whatever they could train the horse to do. And so she had a horse that loved the barrels, loved to do the barrels. And so she started training me to do that. And I would go with her to play days, is what they're called, on the weekends. And we would go all out here, Splendora, New Caney, Porter, places I'd never been. And I would ride the horse against other riders. And I had so much fun. But my father and them, they couldn't come up with money for me to go in a higher circuit. And when I moved in with my best friend and her parents, they lived on the other side of the county. And so it wasn't easy for me to go back and forth to Joanne's to train. So I had to give up the love of barrel racing. And I still played softball, and I still played volleyball for Conroe High. So while I was at Conroe High living with my best friend's parents, my dad had found out that I was over there, and he come over there and he demanded that my adopted father hand me over on Christmas morning. And my adopted father told him no. But how long have you been living with them? I'd been living with them for about 6 months. And then this was Christmas Day, and my adopted father, he was a no nonsense man, and he could do those 6 guns, those double guns on your hips. He could shoot those. And he told my father to get his fat off of this land and not to come back. And my dad wouldn't do it because he was an argumentative Mexican. He's going to stand his ground too. And he come out with them guns, and me and Midge hit the bedroom, and we hid under the bed, and we heard that ting, ding, 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 ding. We heard it hit. And we went running and looked out the front door, and he done shot up my dad's car. And my dad got into it, though, was able to drive it off. And I remember while he was driving, we ran back and looked out the bedroom window as he was driving out, and the dust was flying behind the car. And I looked back at Midge and I said, "Wow, your dad just shot my dad's car up." And she said, "Yeah, that was cool, wasn't it?" I said, "Your dad's the greatest." And then when I went to school the following week, my dad showed up there, and he demanded he was going to take me out of that school by hand. He was going to drag me out of there, and we got into an argument. And my dean, my vice president, vice principal is Mr. Kruger, the same guy who's followed me from Crockett Intermediate all the way. He's followed me all the way. And he gets me in there with my dad, and he starts telling my dad, and there's the campus police, which was Conroe police at the time, and he starts telling him that he cannot take me off that property, that I'm not his no more, that the state had awarded me to go live with the Cockerells, and that he had no bind on me. And he told him that he was going to come back with a gun and shoot up that school. And he was mad. And they let him walk off. They didn't arrest him. They didn't do nothing. They let him walk off. Whenever I turned him into the police, they didn't go investigate him. You know what they said? They told my brother what happens in a man's house behind closed doors is in a man's business. And they wasn't getting involved. There was no CPS like there is today. There was none of that. They made us go to a child counseling over there by the old hospital, where the old hospital is on Avenue G and First Street. And there was this 2-story brown house, and they made us go in there and talk to a counselor. And my dad walked in there in less than 5 minutes, told that lady, "F you," told my mom and me, "F you and F you," and turned around and walked out. And my mom had to leave with him. And I knew my mom was going to get beat up in the car on the way home because of how mad he was. And I told that lady, I said, "You got to get a cop to go to the house because he's going to beat her up on the way home." And she said, "We can't do that." And I thought, how can you not? Ain't this child services? Ain't this child, y'all are supposed to be counseling services, and I know she's going to get beat up. But can't y'all go and follow them to the house and make sure her and my younger brother and sister are okay? Because see, they didn't move them out. They didn't move them out. My mom lied to the cop and told the cop when they came out to investigation that nothing was going on. Looked me straight in the face and told me, "You can marry a man. I can't." And I said, "Mom, you've had three. Couldn't you have one good marriage? I had three." And she just looked at me with this dead stare. And at that moment, I knew she chose him over me, in the pain and the hurt. And then the cops not doing anything. That's when I become defiant to the law. That's when I really and truly didn't care what the law said. And my dad, had us doing things, beneath the law all the time. I had uncles that I'm not going to mention their names, but they sold black mollies and sold marijuana and would put it in those little brown bags and make us bicycle it all over Dugan and all over parts of Conroe, distributing it for them and all. And they tell us not to look in the bags. It's none of our business. Just take this to their friend, and they will give us some money and come back. And so we did this and all. And we thought that was normal. We didn't know that that wasn't normal. But by the time I got to be a teenager and I was living with the Cockrells and all, I started seeing real love. I started seeing where, they really cared about it. They really wanted to talk to you about your day, and all. Larry, not so much as mom. Mom was always, the coolest, but Larry was always like, "Come on up to the shop. I'll teach you how to do auto upholstery and all." He wouldn't let me near none of the sewing machines because, to be honest with you, I wouldn't trust myself on a sewing machine. But he would let me, help do the foam machine and stuff, to blow up the foam in the seats and stuff. And he'd sit up there and he'd talk to me and joke with me and all. And I just sit up there and just talk. And he'd say, "Do you ever shut up?" And I'd say, "Not unless I'm dead. Check my pulse." And that's been my saying ever since. And I grew up, going into bars. So when I started bartending, people knew me. They knew me in the bar. So I got jobs anywhere I went. Johnny B. Dalton's, I worked the back bar on some days. And then, they had a bar called Take Five in town. They had the Handlebar in Conroe. And then they had Hubba-Dubs, which went from Hubba-Dubs to Pitchers. Before that, it was another bar. And I worked all three managers. And then I partied on the other days. I went to work at Sonic and I put myself through, I was going to Texas School of Business in Houston, put myself through nursing school. And then my kid brother got killed at Greens Point. So my little brother and me, we were the closest of two siblings that you could have. I mean, we even had the same dreams from time to time, and we'd wake up and go and talk about these dreams. Well, in 1988, I had gotten married to my husband, Lester Simmons, and I was pregnant with my daughter. And after I had my daughter, my kid brother and my mom, they were staying in Tomball, but my kid brother wanted to come over there and live with us girls because I had one apartment at Greens Point, and in the same apartment complex, my older sister had her apartment with her family and her babies. And my mom was telling my kid brother no, that he wasn't going to move over there, but he was telling us, "Look, I'll get a job." He was only 16 years old. And so he went out looking for a job. He wanted me to go with him that day to look for a job. And I told him, I said, "Mikey," I said, "you have to do these things on your own. They're going to think you're going to need your big sister to go with you to work. So you got to go put in your own applications." And so he left and he went. And about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, my sister had heard on the news about a kid getting killed at Target in Greens Point. He had rode a bike across the parking lot and hit an 18-wheeler and was killed instantly. And she said what caught her eye was on the news, on the gurney, it showed a blue yarn band around the kid's ankle, and that had a key on it. That was my mom and Mikey's pool over there in Tomball, Texas. It was a pool key to get into the pool, the swimming pool. And she said, I believe it's Mikey, Shellie. We got to go. We got to go. And I said, no, no. But before she come to my door, I was asleep on the bed and I heard a hard clang, like metal hitting metal. And my bedroom window faced the playground and the pool area. And so I opened my shades real quick and looked, and there was like no kids out there. I thought maybe a kid slammed their bike up against the wrought iron fence of the playground, but there was no kids. There was nobody out there. And so I kind of shook it off and laid back down. And then my sister come knocking at the door telling me we had to go to Old Spanish Trail in Houston to identify his body. And to this day, we talk about it. And my mama's gone. She died 2 years ago. But they handed Diane the picture, a Polaroid picture of my kid brother. She slid down a wall and said, Mama, it's Mikey. That's all I heard. And my mom got the picture and she froze. And I grabbed the picture of her eyes. And to this day, all I could see was blood coming out where the nose and the mouth might be and the ears. But the rest of the face was always blurred. It was like as if God did not want me to see his face. He did not want to see the mangled. And when we got to the funeral, I was so mad again, here I am mad again in my life. And I started feeling his body in the coffin, and I started feeling all this. And I said, why does he feel like plastic in his body? What is going on? And I cornered one of the men that worked there. And I said, I demand you tell me what is wrong with my brother. What happened? And he said, ma'am, I can't do that. I won't do that. And I said, you got to. By this time, I have this man up against this wall that is in the room where the coffins are. That, they let you see to buy. And the man says, okay, this is what happened. And he starts to telling me how my brother, how his arms were broke, how his ears were almost tore off his face, how his body was crushed, his ribs were crushed and all. And he starts explaining to me how they have to sew the mouth together and the eyes. And as he's doing this, I am like a mother hen. I'm getting madder and madder and brewer and brewer. And my brother David and my brother Daryl and Diane come and grab me away from this man. And they're like, Shellie, you need to stop. You're fixing to get hysterical. And I got mad and I threw my hands up, knocked them all off away from me. And I said, you don't understand. 16 years is all he had. 16 years of life is all he had. And so over the years, I've always wondered what my kid brother would be like. I'd always wondered, what he would be like. Because he was a comedian. He made everybody laugh. He was a super stunt dummy. He loved Macho Man Randy Savage. He would dress up like him. And when my aunt had this big old Oldsmobile car that my grandmother gave her, and she had a big old front end like a Thunderbird, and she'd come driving in the neighborhood, and he'd go rolling over the top of the hood, dressed up with the with the cape-like thing and the bandanas, Macho Man Randy Savage. And my aunt would scare the crap out of her, and she'd get out of that car cussing him, wanting to catch him and whoop his butt. and he was just that kind of character. So he was more of life than life itself. And when he died, I was mad at God. I got mad at God because he took away my kid brother. He took away my son. I helped raise that kid. Him and my kid's sister. We were, my older brother and sister raised us when they were home. And then when my brother went to the military, my sister got married, it was left for me to raise Mikey and Belinda because my mom and dad both worked. When I got to going over to Midge's house and all, there was a couple of years that we didn't talk. We didn't see each other. But by the time Mikey had died, me and my father wasn't at war. We wasn't at war no more. But I could tell that he was going to unleash his anger out on me at any moment. I mean, it was on eggshells going to the funeral homes and listening to them tell us we had no money. We had no insurance on this kid, that how much it was going to cost to move his body just to them and what they do. Finally, Kashner talked to Target. And the next day, after my kid brother got killed, my mom and sister and dad, they're all coming to me. And I'm married now. And they're going, Target officials want to sit us down and talk to us. And I was mad. I said, no. What they want to do is pay for someone's burial that died, that they killed. I said, I'm not going. I'm not going.
So, what did Target have to do with your brother's death?
Well, according to Target, and I had my sister-in-law, the one I ended up moving in with for a few months. Her older sister went to work at Target too, and what had happened was they always said he was a suspect of stealing an $8 cassette tape of Guns N' Roses. My kid brother, when he went to look for the job, he had on my headphone set so he could listen to music and all walking down the road. When he got to Target, he had filled out an application that's on camera, and he had walked through the store a little bit, but then he walked out. While he was walking out, they started chasing him. And at Greens Point, I'm just going to say it for real, there was a lot of black people chasing a white kid, and he was scared for his life. He wasn't scared of them. He just didn't know why they were all chasing him. And so he ran out of the store, and he ended up getting on this bike. And to this day, I never knew who owned that bike. But he rode it across the size of a football field from Target to the light at Greens Point. And there was a Payless shoe store right there on the corner. And that's when he hit the 18-wheeler. And his bike actually hit the battery box of an 18-wheeler and threw him back 50 feet onto the curb. And that's what did most of the damage to his body. And he was pronounced dead. The truck driver had only been working with this company for 4 months. He had 4 kids. He was stopped in traffic when my kid brother hit him. He didn't even know what happened until he got out of his truck. And when I did research after, all this was done, the truck driver said to me, Target officials were there first and all. Well, in the meeting, they told my mom and dad that they found out on camera that it wasn't my kid brother who took that tape and all, that they wrongly accused him and chased him until he died, and they wanted to pay for the funeral. And they paid for the funeral and all. They paid to bury him and all, but us kids was getting up money to pay for the headstone. And my brothers and sisters got to where they just was lying to me about wanting to pay for the headstone. So I paid for it in full, $500, and it's out there in Mims Cemetery right now. And but Target paid for his plot, for the casket, for everything from Cashmere. So when we got the Cashmere had already had the check. They already had a check ready. And I was so mad at my mom and dad because they allowed them to pay for this funeral. I know we needed to bury my kid brother, but I was mad because they lied. They lied on national TV, and all. They could have said, come back on. I wanted them to go back on and do a public announcement that they had made a mistake and that they were going to pay for this child's funeral because they knew we didn't have no money. Not make it look like, okay, y'all going to sign off and no one's going to know about it. And then in Target, in a walkthrough of interviews, my sister-in-law's sister was working for them and as a manager. And they were telling the new employees how to watch for people who go through the store who they think might steal, and to be prominent about are they stealing or not, because they actually had a case where they wrongfully accused a kid and ended up having to pay thousands of dollars out for his funeral. And Target didn't want to do that again. To this day, it took me from 89 to probably 2016 before I walked back in a Target. And then I've gone back in once or twice this year, but it took me a lot to forgive the corporation of Target. And they don't even know. They don't even know I carried that burden with me those years and all that. And I still was mad at my mom and dad for, because I felt like it was jaded money. Like, they're getting paid off to be hush hush so that Target can bury this kid because they wrongfully chased him all the way out to the street and got him killed. Okay. I'm going to talk about. I did graduate from high school, by the way. Um, but Mr. Figueri, uh, because my father showed himself up there at the school and done what he done, Mr. Figueri told me that I couldn't walk with my class. I had to walk with the summer school class because a lot of the people that paid a lot of money into Conroe High didn't want my dad showing up there causing any problems while their kids were graduating. So they made me wait until summer school class and walk with them. And I'd never done a summer school class a day in my life, but I had to walk with their class. It didn't make me a difference. I walked and I got it, and all. And then, okay, now I'm going to tell you, after years of working in bars and stuff and all, I smoked weed and I drank and I partied, but I worked and I put myself through nursing school and stuff and all. And then I later went out to Alvin and went out to Alvin Community School and got my physician's assistant's license. And then I ended up coming back to Magnolia and well, let's back this up. I'm going to take you down this other road now. Um, in 2000, I met this old guy and named Don Phipps, and he ended up being the biggest the biggest hell I ever experienced in 4 years. Because even though me and him didn't work, because I found a crack pipe, I was dusting a high shelf and I didn't even know what it was. It was just this pipe with some wire stuff in it. And I asked him nonchalantly, what is this, And he got it out of my hand and he just started waylaying on me and all. And I was like, what are you doing? I mean, he was slapping me and hitting me and pushing me in the wall. He was like, where did you get this from? What are you doing? And started accusing me of smoking crack. I ain't never smoked no crack a day in my life. I didn't even know what that was. So I ended up leaving him and everything, only to later for him to talk me into coming back. I came back and I had my kids with me, and he started abusing me. And my son didn't like him. My son was little. He was 8 years old. He didn't like him. So I called my ex-husband up, and I did never want to do this. I never wanted to send my kid back home, but I thought for his safety. And then my daughter, it wasn't long after that, he ended up trying to abuse me by holding me on the floor and shoving a bottle of his son's Ritalin down my throat. And we got into a bad fight, and he ended up, I had the dishwasher open, and I had been putting dishes in there, and I had went up against that counter in the throes of the fight, and as I bent down to grab that door to shut it so I wouldn't trip over it, a kick came to the side of my head, and to this day, right up here, I got a scar from that prong stuck in my head from the dishwasher from the inside, and my head just stuck there. And as I pulled it off, I seen the blood just trickling down. And so my daughter's witnessing this. So I grab her and we run out the back door, and we're running through woods, and I see he's done called the law.
And your ex-husband?
No, this ex-boyfriend. Me and my husband had already been split up and all. And we had one divorce in 1991, and he took off and ran to Michigan and didn't want to pay for the services. So when before I knew it, his lawyer was calling me up telling me, Miss Searcy, if you'll pay for this, then I'll take the lien off of your divorce, and y'all can be fully divorced. I said, what are you talking about? When I divorced him, I didn't have none of his bills no more. Why are you charging me? And she said, well, ma'am, he owes me. I said, he owes you, not me. But she says, but I got a lien against your divorce for services. So y'all can't get remarried to nobody until that's paid. I said, I don't plan on remarrying anybody anyway. But then I got with this old boy, and it was always the Romeo, the romance, the flowers, I'm sorry, and then finally that night when we was running, I was running with my daughter, man, and she was like 11 years old, and I'm running with her, jumping over sticks that are sticking out of the ground like this, old broken trees, and I'm trying to be careful with her. And we ran to the senior citizens that lived down the road from us off of White Rock Road in Crockett Martin. And we went to their house and we're muddy all the way up to our knees. And they let us in and they let us shower. And I told them what's going on. And they put us up for the night and they let me borrow their phone. And I call my sister in Houston and say, you got to come get Cassara for her safety. The next morning, Cassara wanted her jacket out of the house. So I had to get her to walk up there with me. And she knocked on their door to get her jacket. And he had already called the law and told me the law was looking for me. It took me about a week to build up the courage to go to Cut and Shoot police station. And I went there and I said, y'all don't know the full story. Let me tell you the full story. My daughter was, I now have her living in Houston with my sister. So both of my kids are out of my grips right now because of this man. And I go to the police station and they tell me that there was a scratch mark on his face. Well, he's 6'4". I'm 5'5". Okay. And the cop tells me to put my hand down on top of the picture that they took of his face. And my hand was about 2 inches shorter, my fingers, from the marks on his face on the picture. And he said, there's no way you could have done this. And I said, I'm telling you the truth. I wouldn't have come up here to face y'all if I wasn't telling the truth. But they never did that to him. They never went to arrest him. Here I am again. I'm thinking the cops are full of you know what, and so as I go from there to my kids going back to their dad to 1996, I ended up with the second divorce, part of the divorce, because he's now gone up there to Michigan and said, I abandoned the kids, thinking that, hey, she doesn't know where I live, and I can file this at the courthouse. They put it on the front door. If she doesn't come and say something, then I'm automatically, awarded full custody of the kids. Well, his mom called me. I was working in Houston at the time, and his mom called me, and I don't even know how she got my number, but I had been calling all his brothers and sisters and her mom, which was his grandmother, trying to find the kids. And I kept on my Southwestern Bell telephone, and I had highlighted different colors for different family members and wrote out which ones were what color. And I kept all those for like 6 years worth of it. And trying to track my kids down. Every time I would call this number, one of his family members would give me the number, and Cassara would answer the phone. I'd say, Cassara, it's your mama. Hey, baby. And like that. And she'd go, Dad, it's Mom. The phone would hang up. As soon as quickly as I could to dial the number back, the phone was out of service. I was like, how do you get your phone out of service that fast? But the phone is out of service that quick. And so his brothers and sisters, he has 9 of them, or he's of 9. He's of 9 kids. And they all would give me his phone number. Finally, his mom said, you got to come fight. And I got up there and I retained a lawyer across the street from the judge who didn't even show up in the courtroom. My ex would not quit smacking on bubble gum, wouldn't address the judge as your honor or your sir. So it pissed off the judge. And the judge was sitting there, had him up there by the box, had me down here. And he was asking me, and I kept looking back because my daughter was in the courtroom. And he said, who's that? Who's that you're staring at? I said, my daughter. And he said, why isn't she in a classroom? How come she's in a courtroom? That little girl needs to be in a classroom. I said, yes, sir, I know. But she's listening to everything unfold. And this judge, he had to listen to the last 6 years of everything my husband put me through, all this stuff. And he says, well, can you prove that you were trying to find your kids? And I brought out that folder full of them phone messages, full of the phone bill. And I handed it to him, and he took his glasses and he went to looking at it, and he said, Lester, who is Doreen? Who is Denise? Who is, this person, that person? Oh, it's my sister. That's my aunt. That's my aunt, He says, I ain't giving you those kids. He goes, y'all both, I suggest you take your wife out to a steak dinner. Y'all discuss how y'all going to do this arrangement between Michigan and Texas. And y'all work it out. And then I'm going to send you to the friend of the court, which is their friend of the court is like our attorney general. And so the next day, he was supposed to pick up Sarah from school and bring Caperton too, and bring them to the front of the court so that I could pick them up. Because the judge said, man, where are you staying at? Because there's no hotels for 200 miles from Cairo, Michigan. So where are you staying at? I said, his aunt and uncles. And they said, what? Judge said, what? You're staying at his family's? And he's trying to tell me y'all abandoned? Yeah, I said, sir, he's lying. And that's all I got to say about that. I lived with a liar all these years, and this is what he's put me through hell. And so whenever we got to the front of the court, my kids didn't show up. Girlfriend, I looked across, and there was this old feed store, and it had a sign on it that said, we sell TNT. I told my friend Sam, he went with me because he was my good confidant, and he had a lot of money, and he didn't care. He was going to bail me out of jail. He came to bail me out of jail because he knew I was going to beat the hell out of Lester, which I did beat the hell out of his girlfriend. She shouldn't have got in my way. But, I did beat her up pretty bad, but the judge didn't say nothing about that. The judge at one point told Lester that he ought to open the side doors and let me finish him off. I said, come on. I started to take off my jacket, and the judge said, no, Miss Searcy, we don't do that here. I said, you're the judge. In Texas, judges do whatever they want to do, because I'm defiant from the law, I believe the law makes their own law, so I'm ready. I'm taking him out. Take him out right now,
So
but
did you get your kids back?
I got joint custody. We got joint custody. He got primary because I lived with my roommate, and my bedroom was the office. So in Texas, you needed a bedroom for a boy and a bedroom for a girl. In Michigan, they could stay together till they were both 11 years old. They could stay in the same room. And so he got primary, so I had to pay him child support. And years later, I get put on disability because my back goes out and everything. I escaped the boyfriend finally, and I'm living up in Jacksonville, Texas. And I was tired. I was tired of everything. And I felt like I was looking over my back all the time for this guy, because this guy always seemed to stalk me. The boyfriend that I was running from with my daughter in through the woods, his name's Don Phipps, which is a bad name in my family. You can say that name to anybody in my family, and they just look at you like, I mean, the man put me through hell. And then in '94, I was held abducted by another boyfriend in Electra, Texas for 3 months, and my family had to come rescue me. So I didn't have a good rapport with them or with men or with nothing. And by the time I got through with Don messing with me, and I'm in Jacksonville, Texas, I start dating my brother-in-law's brother, and we start our landlord. We get a little house together, and our landlord is a prominent member of this apostolic church there in Dyeville, Texas, and it's off a 7-mile hill going into Jacksonville from Rusk. And so we start going there, and I mean, she was just full of all this glory. You could see it in her face. She would take me fishing behind the church in the pond, and she would just talk about being fishermen for the Lord. And she was just so lit up, and I wanted so much to know about this Lord. And, they were talking about Jesus, and I heard God, because in my life, my dad, when I was 6 months old, I was baptized as a Catholic. When I was like 10 years old, I got baptized in a Baptist church. Now I'm, looking at, I say 34 years old, and I'm getting baptized in an apostolic church. And I wanted to be baptized. I wanted the Holy Spirit. I prayed for it and all. And the pastor up there was so kind. And he said, if you have any questions, Sister Shellie, call me day or night. He shouldn't have said that to me, because I was studying the Bible, and I started writing notebooks and journaling, and I'd come to a question I couldn't find the answer for, and I'd call him up, and I'd tell him, I'm going up on the hill on the church. The church is on a hill. Meet me there and explain to me what this means. This man came out of his house. He was a logger by trade. He'd come out of his house every night, meet me up on that hill, and we'd go into the office, and he'd sit me down like me and you were sitting, and he would tell me about the stories in the Bible about how that came across. And he helped me to understand some of this going on in the Bible. But I still wasn't retaining it. And then Miss Evans, she decided, my landlord, that the Angelina Bible College in Nacogdoches, Texas, was having a big college party. It was a big blowout for the end of the year, and they were having all these bands up there, and laser show. And she said, we're going to go in my van, and we're going to take all these hot plates, and we're going to make hot dogs and hamburgers and serve them out there by the basketball court. I said, that sounds like fun. I'll go. So I rode with her and some other ladies in the van, and we got down there. And she told me, go into church, go into the church through the back door. Go up the sidewalk there and go in the church, and go ahead, have you some fun. So I went in there with my little long dress, apostolic dress. I done quit wearing makeup. I was playing the part. And I got in there by these college kids. And I mean, the room looked like it was already lit up. And I couldn't figure out where this light was coming from. And about that time, this old girl grabbed my hand, and I went to talking, and I could not control my tongue. And the things coming out my mouth was not the things I was thinking of saying, and I couldn't do it. And I started feeling like I was being lifted up. And I mean, it was like everything just got super bright. And I don't even remember walking down the sidewalk. I don't know if people carried me or how I got down to the basketball court by Miss Evans. But when I got down there, that tongue was still a rolling and all talking in tongues. And Miss Evans looked at me, and that little old chubby woman went to jumping up and down, clapping her hands. And everybody started clapping. And she said, you got the Holy Spirit, child. You got the Holy Spirit. And I started looking all around, and I started talking, and I said, what is the Holy Spirit? And the words was, it is I am. And I said, I am who? And it wasn't until years later that the word I am has become a prominent word for me for the Bible. Because after I left Jacksonville, me and David broke up. The doctors told me that my back had gone out for the last time, and that this was 2004. By 2005, I would be paralyzed. So I told David, look, if I'm going to die, I'm going to go and live my best life before this. And all he wanted to do was, he was a transmission mechanic. He just wanted to go to work and come home. And he said, okay. And so we broke up. On the day that I was moving out, I went to call for my Chihuahua, and he chased rabbits through the pasture behind the house. And he had these big old ears like my dog Harley does right now, my rat terrier has. And girlfriend, me and David saw this big old hawk come down and grab that little dog and carry it off. And I was screaming, Jeepers Creepers, I started screaming, oh my God, it's Jeepers Creepers. And I drove the truck as fast as I could around the curves to Miss Evans' house. And I told her, you got to come with me, sister. Help me find this dog. This bird just took off of my dog. And she looked at me with all the love in her eyes that she could. She said, honey, that bird's going to take that dog 5 feet up in the air. It's going to drop it, and every bone's going to break. And then that bird's going to scoop down and be picking out it and eating its meat. You're never going to find that dog again. That dog is gone, girl. And my heart just sunk. Right then and there, I felt like God couldn't even save my dog, But I didn't want to be mad at God. But I was hurt at God, I was hurt that he didn't save Peanut. And I ended up driving back I gave the child to David, Buck, and I drove back home with the cat. It was a white cat with one eye was blue, one was green. I called him Captain Baloo. And all the way, when I turned on the AC, he just meow, 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 real crazy. The cat wanted me to roll down the windows. I rolled down the windows. He was fine, but it was hot. Driving back from Jacksonville, Texas to Conroe through Riverside was hot, girl. And we were stuck in road construction. And I couldn't even roll up the windows. The cat would start going off again. And I made it back here. And about 2 months later, because that area, you need different shots for your animals than you do here in Conroe and in Cleveland area, right? And all. So different species, around here. And so I didn't get her one more shot that she needed. And he needed. And he ended up dying in my arms. The kitten was born in my hands and he died in my hands. And I wasn't mad at God for that or nothing. I was taking medicine, and then every once in a while I'd be drinking. I'd go out drinking and all, and then I'd smoke pot, and pot always made me feel relaxed, made me feel jelly, and all. But uh, pills and stuff like Lorcets would speed me up. So I was on this roller coaster of feeling relaxed, but moving and drinking, is not a good combination either. And so I did that for about 8 years, 9 years, and then my adopted dad died. And so my adopted father, I get the phone call that my adopted father had died, and I decide that I'm going to come home. Well, actually, he was still in the hospital. And I came, and, my adopted mom told me I could go up there and visit him and see him. And when I walked in there, he couldn't hardly talk too well, but he had told me to take care of Ruby Joe. And I told him I would. I didn't know. I didn't know at the time that my adopted brother and sister were doing methamphetamines and stuff. And so I came back to live over there with Ruby Joe with my disability check, and I was helping her pay bills with that. And the next thing I know is my brother invites me to come over to his house. And I think I had like the flu or something, because I got really sick at this time. And I ended up falling asleep on his floor, and I felt like I couldn't breathe hardly. And he comes and wakes me up, and he's got this light bulb like you put in your lamps or your house. And he's got this torch, and he's blowing all this smoke. And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, what are you doing? And he says, man, try this. I'm like, I'm not trying that. And so I'm so weak, I'm not getting off the floor. So he lights it, and then he puts it in my mouth, and I inhale it, and quickly I blow it back out. But as I blow it back out, I feel relaxed, and I feel like my body was aching and had a lot of pain, like a flu symptoms, and I didn't feel it no more. And so I told him to do it again, and he did it again. I said, what is that? And he said, man, it's meth. And I said, what's that? I'd never heard of meth, and I was just a pothead drinker, and all. And then I ended up sitting up, and he ended up showing me how to, like, I put the light bulb to my mouth, and then he lit it and all. And the smoke came in my lungs, and then it went back out. Well, I really didn't like it at first, but it took away the pain in my body. And at this time, I had already been told I had a breast tumor that was probably cancerous. After I had my son, I had a hysterectomy because of cancer, and I had cancer in the uterus and cervix, so they had to take that out. So now I'm being told, I have a breast lump and all, and they want to do go in and do a biopsy of my lymph nodes under my armpit. So I let them do that, and they're telling me I'm dying, and I can't wrap my head around all this. My adopted dad, the one that just saved me, is dying, and now I'm dying, and all. And then this feeling, this meth just kind of masked all this emotions that I was feeling, to where nothing seemed to matter anymore. It was all right, it's all right, everything's okay. That's how people feel. They feel like they're invincible. Everything's okay. And so it wasn't long after that, Danny asked me to sell some of his meth to somebody. And I told him, okay, but how do I do it? Because I knew about weed, how to measure weed, but I didn't know about meth. And he had taken me into his closet in his bedroom. That's where he would go to, keep his stuff. and he's showing me how to do the baggies, how to weigh it out and everything, and all. And I'm like, why are you charging for the baggie? He says, well, you buy it, you gotta make your money back on that. And so he's showing me how to do this empire. And so I start selling it. Well, I start selling it, and it becomes more than just neighbor people. It becomes different organizations, Aryan Brotherhood, the people from Louisiana started coming over, and all people coming down from Dallas, and they're all giving me their stuff to sell because I sell real quick, and they get their money. And I don't cut nothing. I don't know nothing about cutting nothing, And at this time, my brother is being put in jail, right? And so there's people that he sold to that are going into my mom's garage, which is this big. She had a 3-car port garage that you could pull 18-wheelers into, and a big garage that had all my dad's. When he died, they put all the auto upholstery stuff in there, so all the sewing machines and the material and all. And these people are just going in there getting whatever they want. And so I'm telling my adopted mom, we got to lock this up. We got to lock it up until Danny comes home from jail. And she's like, well, get a lock and do it. So I'm doing it, and I'm fighting these people. I'm having to chase them out of the place. These meth heads with a machete and stuff, picking up tools and throwing it at them, to get them to get away, And I decided, I can't do this night and day, stay up night and day. I can't do it. So I would do a little bump to make it last, to make me get through. And I started doing it like that. And the next thing I knew was it went from that to like maybe a 40 grams a day, and to do it. And I would stay up for like 3 days. But every night I would make myself go make peanut butter pancakes at my mom's house. My mom would wake up at 3 o'clock morning, and she always had this long cigarette like Virginia Slim, and she'd turn on Kenneth Copeland, and she'd be sitting there going, watching me, going, what are you doing in my kitchen at 3 a.m.? I said, I'm making pancakes. I'm just making some peanut butter, pancakes and banana pancakes, and I'm making them. I'm putting them in little baggies, and I'm putting them in my backpack. So I can take them back to the bus RV that she gave me, the barbecue bus RV that we used, because my dad used to do the old barbecue cook-offs at Montgomery County, and also it was their bus that they would take there, and so Midge, she done gutted a lot of it, so the wiring was gone, so we had to run extension cords from the shop to it, and I would sell stuff out there. Well, the cops would be watching my brother's double wide for people to come and go there. They never noticed that people went around the trailer. They come in on off of 2854 onto Felder Lane, and then they make the U-turn. Well, as they were leaving or as they were coming in, I would slide the window open to my trailer on that side away from the cops, because all the windows on the front, my dad had that mirror tent put on it. So when they was at the cook-offs and they had their swinger parties in the tent, nobody could see. So the cops couldn't see on the other side of the trailer, and it was me selling it like a they'd call me and tell me what they want. They'd come up and they'd get their money to me, and I'd give them their bag, and that's how it went. And before long, I sold a lot of dope in this county. I really did. But the night that I got busted, this was incredible, because I had been already complaining to God. I hate tweakers. I hate them, God. They steal everything. I'm not a thief. I'm not going to steal none of this. But they want me to sell the stuff that they steal, and God, I'm not doing it no more. You need to come down here and you need to stop them. Not stop me, because I'm a tweaker too now, but stop them. I still wanted to get high, but my friend, my co-defendant, I had 2 of them, Michelle Heinrich and Jessica Summerall. Jessica Summerall still going in and out of jail, out of prison. At this time, this is her 5th time getting drug charges at the age of 27, going 5th time to prison. And I don't know anything about it. And she comes over, and she has a girl coming from Magnolia, Michelle Heinrich, whose parents and grandparents are the sheriff of Stagecoach. I've never met her, but she's coming over with an ounce. This guy who I'd gotten high with and watched him shoot up dope repeatedly. I didn't shoot up dope. I smoked it because I don't like needles. I don't do that. And this guy, he had Jessica talked me into it one time because my pipe had broke, and so she had clean needles, and so I let her one time. And I remember laying back across the bed thinking, oh my God, the rush was just like fire. I mean, fire through your body. It was just so bad. And got up and I said, whoa, how do y'all ever make it on that? But it wasn't like a few minutes later, I was up and moving, girl. I was up doing all kinds of stuff that I normally wouldn't do. And like moving furniture and stuff, rearranging the garage and stuff, stuff like that, working out in the heat. And this guy, he called and he said, hey, his name was Tony, and he said, hey, I'm looking to go in on an ounce, anybody that's got anything. And I said, matter of fact, I'm getting out of the game. I don't want to be in it no more. My adopted mom, I'm in my brother's double wide right here, and right in the backyard off of Felder is my mom's house. Well, it was my mom's house. Across the street is a store, is a grocery store, a little convenience store, an Exxon, I think it is. And uh, these people are calling saying they backed into the store right under the camera. And I knew the man kept the cameras on because the cops were watching my brother's house through those cameras. And I told him, no, come over to the property across the street because it's private property. They have to warrant to come up on here. And they were like, no, come on, man, just come over here. He goes, my uncle's the one that's got the money. He's going to fund me, and I'm going to turn it over and make him some money. And he wants some more money made out of it. So I go over there, and truth be told, I took the crystal meth at the time was a amber gold color, and I showed it to him at 50, and he turned around and he said, okay. I said, but you want more than that. You want an ounce or a half an ounce. Let me go get this girl. And so I walked back across the street from the store back to my brother's house. And Michelle Heinrich's in the car in the driveway. And Summerall is in the yard with me. And there's two big, like, oak trees right there in the front. And we were standing right underneath it. And I heard a voice say to me, go left. Go to your mom's now. And I shook it off, and I thought, oh, I'm hearing things, because I never seen tweaker people in the trees. I never seen anything weird when I was high. I wasn't like, some of these other people seeing all kinds of stuff. And so I looked at Summer and I said, did you say something to me? And she said, no, girl, I didn't say nothing. Do you want to go to your mom's? Because I heard you say, let's go left. I said, I didn't say that. She looked at me and I looked at her and I said, girl, whoa. I said, let's just hurry up and go over here and take care of this. 15 minutes.
So you didn't go left?
No, I went right. And I went right up over there. And Tony told Jessica to get in the front seat, and I was going to get in the back seat. And I thought he was going to swerve in behind me. But when I got in, the doors locked, and I looked up and he was gone. I mean, I couldn't even find him on the sidewalk nowhere. And I'm looking for him, and all these car lights come in. And I mean, they come in fast, and they're jerking me out of the back seat. And I remember digging I had a trench coat, and I had pants on, and I had a little mini skirt over. I'm tweaked out, and I have a backpack full of like makeup and these camera case bags full of just like, I did sewing. Like a lot of the girls come from the burlesque shows in Louisiana, and I'd fix their costumes while they were here, because I'd tweak and I'd make stuff. I did graffiti art, and on turn trash into treasure and stuff. So I was always into making stuff, and I'd make their costumes. And so I had bags like that, like needles and thread and all. And the cops were like, anything going to poke me? And I said, yeah, that's my sewing kit. If you go digging around it, you're going to get poked. So they just moved those bags aside. They never looked at them. And some of my makeup cases, some of them they open up like a tripod. Well, the cops didn't realize it because they're all men, so they just twisted open and they just see powder. But in the next case, if they would have flipped it over and done the back, I probably had a baggie in there, a little baggie in there. So I'm sitting there and we're being arrested. And I mean, girlfriend, they're jerking the jacket off of me and they're putting me in a paddy wagon in this one seater. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching them dig through that car. But before they pulled me out, I took that 50 and I tossed it. Well, the tire's on the inside of the car in that SUV by the window. They tore every seat out of that car looking for dope. They didn't find none. None. I was sitting in that paddy wagon shaking like a lamb, girl, and all of a sudden I hear, and I turn and look, and I can see through the little holes this dog back there behind me, and I'm like, oh, he's going to eat my ass up. And thank God that's metal, and all. And then I'm sitting there, and the cop pulls me back out, and he starts shaking me all around. It's the uncle. He's an undercover cop. My friend Tony, he done been he was an informant, yeah, and he's gone, and this man's like jerking me all around, and he's like 4 foot tall, and he's kicking the ground, and I'm looking at him and looking at these cops, and I noticed that all the cops that were there had the black rings on their fingers, and all. And I'm looking at them and all, and then some of them have gloves on, and everything. But when we went to the cop shop on 2854, that's what I call it. And it's a municipal building and all, but they took us there to take all of our stuff and go through it. Well, I had so much stuff on me that they didn't want to go through it. And I had a pipe that I had forgot about, and it had a bunch of dope in it, about a gram of dope in it. One solid piece like that was a gram, weighed a gram. And I saw him have it on the counter. And then as he was going through stuff, the cop, the undercover cop, he knocked it off on the ground and it broke. And we're sitting there in chairs. And at the same time they bring us in, they bring in 2 people from Willis, from Calvary Road. They got at the store over there. They have them behind us in the room behind us, so there's a window between us. I don't know them. I just know the man's name is Big Mike, and he's from Louisiana. And the girl that he was with actually was Summerall's cousin. And but when they got through, this other cop come through the back door, and he was sweeping, and he swept that whole thing right up, that whole glass broken thing. And I just went, and that cop turned around at the table. He said, who's saying what? I better not hear y'all talking. And I just went like this. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Man, God saved me on that. He really did, because that was a lot of time. That's at least a 2-year state jail time for a grant.
So you did end up in jail. How did that happen?
Well, I ended up in jail that night. And as we went to court and pre-trial, this is a serious part here. I'm sitting there and they're telling us that our bonds are $100,000, and we're in D'Amico's court, and I'm sitting there and I start staring at the bailiff's gun on his side, and I was contemplating grabbing for it. But I wasn't saying that to nobody. I was just staring at it real hard. And Summerall sticks her little head out and looks at me and says, Searcy. And she's called me Aunt Shellie. And she said, Aunt Shellie. And I turned down, looked at her and said, what? She said, don't even think it. About that time, the bailiff turns around and he says, ma'am, is there a problem here? And I look at him and I say, no. And I quit thinking about it. That was the only time that I really thought about killing myself at that time, because I didn't know I talk a lot, and people would talk a lot in prison, get killed. It's what I heard. So I wasn't gonna, I wasn't gonna be chatty Cathy in prison. But I went to jail, and when I was there for 10.5 months.
What jail did you go to?
Montgomery County.
Okay.
Montgomery County knew me. I was a frequent flyer. And 2004 to 2006, I went to jail 10 times. Me and my kid sister was always fighting, so I have 4 family violences on me. And I had like a speck of cocaine at one time. Okay. And actually, they dug it out of a tooth. Not these teeth. These are knee teeth. God gave me these teeth. And I had a tooth, and they dug it out of the tooth. And, that was whenever I used to, go down to the hop and go dancing and stuff and all. Some of us girls would do lines of Coke or eat it, and that's where that came from. And I get pulled over with this old joker over here that's going too slow down Silverdale, bring me back home. So the cop pulls us over, figure out why he's too slow, and they see that little piece, and they went all crazy. They started pulling us out and checking the truck. So I, for 10 and a half months, I'm in county jail. The first, I got put in there February 3rd, and in March, I'm barely reading the Bible. I'm barely grasping it. Somebody mailed off for free Bibles, and the free study Bibles in this place will give you a free Bible. And so they gave it to me. And I'm trying to read it, but not as much, not that much. And I'm still reprobated. I'm still fighting my case and all. But I have asthma, and I start having asthmatic attacks. Well, it got to where Montgomery County was understaffed, and they didn't have enough people for me to get a guard to walk me down the hall to the infirmary. Where I was at the time in the jail is called the old kitchen part. It's called the E-Quad in Montgomery County, and it's where the old kitchen was. So when you use the showers or the bathtub, use the showers, not bathtub, or the toilets, and you flush them, noodles come up out of the floor. Hair comes up out of the floor. It's nasty, and the floors are real, like, always moist because because the humidity in the air. And so I'm having trouble breathing, and I keep hitting the emergency button for them, and they say, "Seriously, we're waiting on someone to come. Just wait." Well, it gets to where I can't breathe, and my chest, my chest, it feels like it's going up and down, and so when the girls came through with the mop buckets, there's a iron bars that when you first come in the door, there's iron bars, and you go through this door, and then you go through that door to get into the cell. But the girls, they put the buckets in there, and in case there's a riot or a fight or anything, and they got to clean the rooms, they can put the buckets in there safely and keep that door shut going into the dorm, and we got like maybe 5 girls in there, and the bed above me is empty, and girls are keeping their commissary on it, stacking their commissary on it. Well, there's this one little black girl. Well, let me go back to this. Okay, before the lung thing, this little black girl, her name was Miss Jones, and she was wild girl. She was getting in trouble at Tall Timbers Apartments here in Conroe. Her and her boyfriends, they were in a gang, and all, and they were robbing people. They were ordering pizza and robbing the pizza man. They were robbing the old people that lived there. They were really just being havoc, just really bad characters. And so they put her in this tank with me, and she comes out of the shower. I always rolled up the end of my mattress. And when the bucket come in to clean, I clean first because I wanted the toilet clean and the shower clean because I took the first bath in there. And I cleaned the tables, and I mopped and swept the floors. I didn't ask for no help. But I cleaned my area there too with the wash rags, and I ate on my bunk. I wouldn't eat with the other girls because I didn't like all that hair in my food. And they're always forever flinging their hair around. And I said, no, I'm going to eat on my bunk. And so Miss Jones come over there and started twerking naked with soap still on her body right in front of my face while I was eating. And then she went over there, and in the dorms, there's a little square window in the E-Quad where the guards can look in for head count. And she's looking out at that window at another girl at her window, and she's all twerking, and I come up with that tray. And I grew up, my dad had I had black girlfriends, but my dad, he was always prejudiced, against black people and stuff and all. And so all this prejudice just come up in me all of a sudden. And I picked up that tray and I told them girls at that table, I said, duck. And I flung that tray and it hit the bars, and came back and hit her in the butt and flew off her butt. And she said to me, and I turned around, I stood up and I said, listen, girl, you don't let the gray hair fool you. And I don't have no teeth in my head. I look like a little crackhead. I said, don't let the gray hair fool you. And I turned around and I knew from street fighting, because I was a professional street fighter, and I knew I could count her steps as she was running to me to when I turned around, a 6-inch punch would break her larynx. I was that trained. She didn't know that. So I turned around and told her, come on, let's hit the bricks. I've been tall timber. I used to live in tall timbers too. I had a apartment there for a small period of time, and I told her, come on, girl, hit the bricks. That's what we used to say in the timbers. And she wouldn't run towards me. But when she started to come to me, the guards rushed in there and they pulled us both out and everything. And I was like, let me at her, because I'm fixing to go to prison. I know I'm going to prison. So you're going to let me at her. So, because I ain't going to go to prison and be no wuss, because they'll punk me out. This is what I'm thinking. And I'm telling the guards this. And I noticed that the same guards, male guards, they all have the black wedding ring band on. So I looked down and I said, are you task force? Because that's who picked me up. And this tall, slender one that worked there, I don't know if he still does, he's a nice guy and everything. But he's like, seriously, I can't tell you that.
Really? So the black rings mean something?
Yes. I think the black rings mean they're task force. Okay. But I see a lot of men nowadays wearing just the black rubber ring, and they're not in the police department. Yeah. But all the ones there, they work task force. And he'd just smile at me and he'd say, I can't tell you that, I have to kill you. And I'd laugh, and he'd say, seriously, listen, I'm not letting you go back in there. I'm not letting you get a case for fighting. Well, see, I done took down years ago 2 of their full-grown officers by myself. So he knew that my hands, they were labeled as weapons, and every time I come to jail, they'd say, seriously, what kind of combat training do you have? I didn't have no combat training. I wasn't in the service. I didn't learn karate in a class. I learned it from streets, And so I tell them I didn't know. I didn't have none, and I wasn't trying to get them to put me on there saying I had, weapons for hands, but they did. And every time they'd ask me that.
Okay, Searcy, you were telling me about things that happened in the jail. Let's go there.
Well, after that had happened, I went back into my cell and I started still having the breathing problems. And when the girls came in with the buckets, when they come in, I went out. I went in the hallway, and in the hallway, it's a long corridor from the E-quad, and on the left is the men's side, and they have windows. And when I come in there, I didn't put no one down as family, but everybody knew me as Aunt Shellie on the streets. So as I'm going down the hall, the guard is holding the door to the infirmary, and he knows me by name, and he's going, seriously, go back. You don't have a guard walking with you. But I'm hearing my chest go up and down, and I'm feeling it, and my heart starts beating harder, and I can feel them in my ears. And the next thing I know is as I collapse on the ground. And as I collapsed on the ground, I don't know how long I was down there. I don't know how many days I was out. The nurses said it was for several, but that they suspected my lung had collapsed. And they have now got me on an IV pole, which they usually don't carry in the jail. Okay, so this is the first sign something's wrong with me. And they got me on this hospital bed that's got this remote control wire that's it's coil like this, like an old telephone coil, coil, however you say it. And they have me laying in this bed, and they're like, seriously, we got to get you strong enough to go to court. And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, you've been held out of court for 3 months. I said, what? And they said, yeah. They said, we believe your lung collapsed. I said, why not in the hospital? They said, because you're a runner. And we don't got a God. We don't have enough money to pay for a cop to sit with you day and night at the hospital to make sure you don't run. And I said, yeah, but I'll come right back. They said, seriously, we know you will, but we can't do that. You're on this big case. And so 3 months later, I'm
Yeah.
still not going to court. So as I'm in the infirmary and everything, I've already been in jail for about 6 months, and they decide that no, actually it was 4 months, and they decide they're going to send me to court. But I had to go in court after everybody else because I have an IV. Okay. And this is what they're doing to sustain my life. Well, they bring me into the courtroom through the side doors, and D'Amico is still my judge. And D'Amico takes one look at me and says, get her the hell out of my courtroom. And I'm thinking, what the heck? What? And so they take me back to the jail. And when they take me back to the jail, I told them I needed a breathing treatment, and the lady said, "Okay, we'll get you one when we get back." They went to distribute with their carts medication to the other inmates around the jail, and it usually takes about 2 hours to do all the inmates, the male and the female side. Okay, and so I'm sitting there, and my chest is going back and forth, and I'm having trouble breathing, and I'm sitting on the bed, and I'm twirling the thing, and they don't have the IV on me. They took it off of me when I came back to jail. And I'm sitting there because it pissed off D'Amico to see me with it. So they untook it out of my arm, and I'm sitting there and I'm twisting the bed thing around, and I start talking, and I said, God, I think I'm going to die. If there's a God and you're real, you need to show up now. I need you. You need to show up. And as I'm doing this, I'm getting more and more panic attacks, about my breathing and all. And then I hear in the cells, when you're in there, this part that goes out to the infirmary is a big metal door with a window. And every 30 minutes through every jail, the cops have to do a head count. And the reason why is because they have so many unexplained deaths in jails, especially county jails. And at this time in Montgomery County, they had 25 unexplained deaths. Like they couldn't explain how these people died. Okay. And so I'm sitting there and I'm twirling this thing, and I didn't realize there was a man in the room next to me. And all of a sudden I hear him screaming, and he is screaming, and I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? And all. And I don't know if it's just in my mind, if I'm hearing this or what, because my breathing, is so loud in my ears and all, and I'm panicked and all. And all of a sudden I see what looks like a big snake, right? And he's sitting there hissing at me, and he's giving me this really bad angry look, like he doesn't even want to be bothered with me. And I start screaming, who are you, who are you, who are you? And I start twirling that thing around my hand, that bed thing around my fingers and all. And I start getting more and more panicked because now I see this thing that looks like a big snake, a big viper looking at me. And then all of a sudden, in the back of the jail, because the jail facing this way, the door he came in from was from the aggravated side. On the men's side is an aggravated side door, and there's bars, there's rails like this. It ain't concrete. It ain't like solid, like these ones are. And so I see this light. The back side of the infirmary had beds, for people that needed to stay in there because they were hurt or stabbed or whatever, or sick. They had something wrong with them. And the light came on the back. So I'm thinking it's a guard. And I start screaming for the guard to help me, to help me. And the man over here is still screaming. And that thing looks at the light and tells the light something in a language I don't understand. And I start talking to God, and I say, you need to come save me. And I hear this voice say, it's not your time. And I was like, what do you mean it's not my time? What do you mean it's not my time? And so I look at the snake and I say, who are you? Are you the devil? I said, maybe I'll come and sit with you, visit with you. And he said, I don't want you. He goes, he told me just like this, said, I don't want you. I don't want him to have you. I said, who is him? Who are you talking about? And just like that, the bed went flying and I went topsy-turvy and I landed on the floor. And when I looked up, Knig, this big OCO in there, Dana Vales, Sergeant Dana Vales, and Officer Mal. He was his last name is Malmay. He was higher than a sergeant, and there he's sitting there, and they're trying to pull the bed thing off from around my neck. How it got around my neck, I did not know, But when Knig pulls it out of the wall, right? It He pulled the whole wiring out, the whole wire out of the wall when he pulled the cord out with all his strength. And the bed was still tightening. And I hear Malame say, get it off her neck. It's still tightening and it ain't even plugged in no more. And when I get it off of me, I don't even know how I look, sister. I don't even know how I'm looking. But I looked straight at Knig and I said, why didn't you help me? I heard you ding the wall 6 times. So you had to look in here. You had to see me. He said, seriously, each time I looked in here, you looked like you were asleep. I said, what do you mean asleep? You didn't see my hands moving the thing? He said, you wasn't moving. I said, what are you talking about? And now I'm really freaked out thinking that, what just happened to me? What did I hear? What's going on? And Dana Vales looks at me. She'd been a sheriff there in Montgomery County, I know, for all my times coming to jail. And she was always the only one that really could talk to me. And she told me, she said, seriously, she said, calm down. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Well, they put me in 24-hour hold. And 24-hour hold has it's like a concrete bed type thing, and then they give you a mat. And they don't give you any clothes, because now they're trying to decide if this was a suicide attempt or what was going on. Knig done went through and told the trustee girls I tried to kill myself. So this is going around the jail, and it's uproaring a lot of people because they're thinking Aunt Shellie is dead, And so they had to get him quiet. So they went ahead and they dismissed him off of duties. They told him that he had to leave without pay. They kicked him out of the jail. And I'm sitting in the 24-hour hold, and every time a tray would come in, I was there more than 24 hours, okay? Because there was trays stacking up that they had to come and get. I wasn't eating. I wasn't drinking. I was cold. Every part of my knuckles, everything that bent in my body was red and inflamed. My knees, my knuckles on my toes was red. I mean, I was freezing in that room, and my arthritis was acting up, and everything was red and inflamed. And Dana Vales, before Dana Vales comes in, my co-defendant, the one in the car, Michelle Heinrich, she's a trustee down there in booking, and she gives me my tray and a little piece of paper falls out. Well, I'm under camera, so I don't know what to do. And I look down at it and look at her, and I'm shaking, and I'm just in panties and a bra. And the guard tells me, seriously, pick it up and read it. And I'm like, the camera. And she's like, don't worry about the camera. Pick it up and read it. So I picked up the letter, and I went to the little stainless steel desk, and I sat down on the stool, and it was so cold on my body that I felt like the bones in my butt were breaking. So I stood back up, and I went like this, away from the camera, and I looked at the letter, and the letter was written from everybody in the jail that could sign it. This is illegal. It's a kite. But it went all around, and people were going, Aunt Shellie live, Aunt Shellie live, Aunt Shellie live. And I was like, well, what's going on? What's going on with me? And so I threw it, I crumbled it up, and I threw it in the toilet, and I flushed it, because so when I flushed that, I went back and I tried to eat, but I couldn't swallow. I hadn't ate or drank in so long that my throat, or maybe it was my screaming in the room for so long, that my throat felt like it was on fire. Anytime I even tried to drink water or Kool-Aid or anything, it just stung. My throat stung. It was so horrible. And um, then they brought in a payphone on a cord, on an extension cord, and they said, "Seriously, call your next of kin." And I told them, I said, "I don't have any of their numbers." And they said, "Well, we can get your phone and you can open it and look at the numbers." And I said, "I can't." And they said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because my family's tired of coming. They're tired. They ain't going to come anyway." And um, they said, "Seriously, just try to remember a number." And then I looked at the guard and I said, "I have people's numbers in there that I do not want to give out because it incriminate me and hurt me in the long run." So the guard said, "Okay, I understand." And so I told him just to take the phone. I didn't have no next of kin. And so they took the phone and they went out. And then I was sitting in the bed in the cubbyhole, and I'd fallen asleep. I thought, I went somewhere deep, and I just kept going and going and going. And as I was being lifted up, it was total darkness around me and all. And then I remember waking up feeling like I was laying in someone's hand and they were stroking my hair. In the jail, I had short hair. I had a lot of wigs that I used to put on when I sold dope, but my hair was short. It wasn't long. And I started feeling like somebody was caressing me, but they wouldn't talk to me. They would just breathe on me, and their breath smelled like cookies, like sugar cookies or something. It was such a sweet, sweet smell. And I knew I was getting healed. I knew my body was healing. I knew this was a place of healing, but yet it was so far away, but it was so calm there that I did not ever want to leave there. I did not ever. And then finally, I woke up and I'm back in the cell, and I've got I'm sitting on the metal part of the bed, and I've got the mat up against me like this because I'm trying to stay warm underneath there, like it make a tent because the air vents were so cold. And the door opens and in comes Dana Vels and Officer Malame, and they come in, and I think Lieutenant Malame is what he was, and they come in and Dana turns her chair backwards and straddles it, and he sits straight, and I'm looking at him, and I mean I can't even talk. My throat hurts so bad. And they're telling me, "Seriously, listen, state's coming in and they're going to do their research on what happened to you in the infirmary, and we just need you to be honest with her." And so I'm listening to them, but I'm still thinking that they're fixing to put me in the crazy chair or something, because now I done got back word that Kenig went through the jail and tried to say I suicided. And Dana looked at me and she said, "Seriously, you're a fighter. You've been in this jail. I've been taking care of you. You've been here so many times. You got freaking flower miles." She said, "And girl," she said, "so I know you're a fighter. So I know you didn't try to commit suicide in there. What really happened?" And I just look at her and I'm staring at her and I'm like, I, I can't explain. I said, one minute I'm seeing something and I'm yelling and for help, and the next minute I'm looking at y'all, and I don't want to explain to them what I seen. I don't want to explain what this hideous thing was I seen, because it was something supernatural. It was something that I couldn't explain, and the light never said a word. And through that experience, I learned later on that sometimes you don't have to say nothing, and God will talk for you. God would talk to these people from their insides out whenever someone's coming against you. All you got to do is stay quiet. But at this time, I told Dana Vels, I just shook my head no. I didn't want to talk. And Malama looked at me, and Dana said, "Shellie, we heard," or she said, "Seriously, we heard the voices." At this time, I look at her and I whisper, "Voices." And she said, "I don't want you. I don't want him to have you." Who said that? and I start bawling and I start crying and I'm shaking and I'm crying and everything's red on me and I don't even know how I look. And I tell him, I said, that was the monster that came through from the back room. And I said, it was the devil. He was there to get my soul, but he didn't want it. He didn't want me to live, but he didn't want God to have me. I said, but the light came on. I still don't know who the light was. And I'm getting this out in between pants because I'm crying and Dana comes over, guards don't usually touch you or nothing, it's against the rules. And she patted me on my shoulder. She said, seriously, tell them that. When State comes in, tell them that. Mallory May told me, he said, we wrote our report and told him it was something supernatural happened in there. Because we went back and reviewed the cameras and the cameras did look like you were looked like you were sleeping. So there's no way you could have been trying to kill yourself. But we seen something different. When we came in that room, we heard something different. He said, I've been in a jail. He'd been there like, I don't know, 16, 20 years, and he'd never seen nothing like that. He had never witnessed it, They said they thought that I was the first person that was rescued from death that was unexplainable. And for me just to tell the state, well, they put me in booking in a room and put me in the first room. And if you've ever been in jail, and I'm not in booking, but I'm right here in the hallway. There's D quad. That's what it's called, D quad. I call it deranged, which is for the girls that fight and fuss, and are bad characters. That's where they put them. But they had moved every one of those girls out of them. It's an 8-man run. 8-man run is individual cells with bars like this, and it's 8 rooms, and then they have a day room with bars, and then there's a shower in there, and there's tables, and there's a commissary booth, and there's a payphone, and there's a TV. Okay, and so when they roll the doors, all 8-room doors. Okay, everybody can come out and go to the day room, do their bathroom duties or whatever, and all. Well, I'm the only one down there. And on the first night, my senses are coming back to me. But before that, when I'm in 24-hour hold, after they leave out, I feel some type of hope. I feel this hope. And I decide I'm going to go try to pee because now I got the urge to pee finally. And I go to sit down in that stainless steel toilet, and it felt like all my bones were just, like you take a pencil and you just shave the wood off, like all that was going on. And I got up off of there and I went to the sink and I was trying to push the button for the hot water because my hands were so red and arthritic that, I needed heat on them. So I wanted hot water. And when I looked up into that mirror and I saw the coral of that coral around my neck, it was dried black blood and dried red blood. And my eye sockets were blood straight across both of them. I had been strangulated in that jail. And on video, they didn't see that. They didn't see none of that. But when they were there in person, it was a whole different experience. And Dana and Mallory told me to state that. Well, after I went to when I was in that room on that 8-man run in D quad, the first night, all my senses were coming back. Because like when I came back from that heavenly place where I felt that warmness and smelt that smell of sweetness, and my senses were coming back, and these girls were coming in yelling and cussing and screaming and kicking the walls and screaming, girls screaming, blood curdling screams. These girls are like they're like in the jumpsuits, tied up in these rooms where they have no way of hurting themselves, and they're screaming. And the guards have to come check still every 30 minutes. And I tell them, like, my head is about to burst open. You got to move me to another room. Won't you move me down to room 8, far away from everything? And the guard said, seriously, I can't move you to room 8. And I said, why? She said, because you got to be kept under camera. I said, why? I'm not going to hurt myself. They said, no, seriously. What they believe happened to you, they want to catch it if it happens again. And so they have to watch you under camera. So the furthest I can take you is room 3 because the day room camera is still on you. I said, okay, I'll go to 3. And so I went to bed 3. And this is so now they got me in this 8-man run, and I'm in room 3, and I finally get out of the room and I go into the shower, and I remember that hot water coming over my body, every part that was arthritic. I stayed in that shower for so long. I was the only one down there. And I remember just thinking to myself, thank you, that I have this hot water. And I'm thanking God, and all. Later on, I'm in my cell, and of course I'm eating in my cell because I'm the only one down there. And the guards are like, seriously, you can come out and sit at the table and watch TV, watch anything you want. You're by yourself. And I said, no, I don't feel like watching no TV. And I look down, and they bring me in my stuff, because whenever you get moved out of one cell into another cell, they bring your stuff to you, whatever you had, your commissary, whatever. All I had was that Bible that someone had given me, and a cup and a spoon, that the jail gives you. And so they come in, and they can't give it to me in the infirmary, so they can't give it to me in 24-hour hold. So now they can give me my stuff. And the guards come in with the trays of food, and I just put it at the end of my bed and eat it. And so I spent a lot of time alone down there during the day, and the guards would come 3 times a day and give me my medication. And the last time they would come about 10 o'clock at night. If they were shorthanded, they would come to me about I'd say about 12 o'clock midnight. Well, I'd been down there for about 2 months, maybe a month and a half, and I felt this nudging. If they can't wake you up, they think you're dead. They'll hit you with a clipboard and wake you up. So I felt like someone was nudging me with a clipboard. So I woke up and I said, "Who's there?" And I got up and I looked down the hall through the bars, and I said, "Is there an officer in here? I'm awake now." And I heard nobody. I heard nothing. And so I'm looking, and the hallway's lit up, but the rooms are not. And the day room is lit up. But there's no one down there with me. And so I sit down, and I start to fall back asleep, and something nudges me again and wakes me up again. And I'm like, who is this doing this? And all I see in the corner, it looks like a white drape, like a white skirt and some sandals. And I'm looking, and they look like men's sandals. And I'm looking at them, and I'm going, oh, I'm hallucinating again. Oh my God, it's coming back. And I said, look, I don't want to fight you. I don't want to fuss with you, You can be my friend. You can stay down here, you mind your business. I mind mine. And the thing just told me to look at my Bible. It said, look at your Bible. And I looked down at my Bible, and I'm not lying to you one bit. The book was open to the words that said sanctification and justification. And he said, you are mine. I chose you. And just as quick as he said that, he was gone. Well, I sat there and I tried looking up those words. And I asked the librarian if she had a book. She brought me concordance. And girl, I was coming off of drugs. I couldn't even concentrate on no concordance. That just gave me more scriptures. And I didn't understand the first scripture, so I wasn't going to understand the rest. So I was like, oh, that ain't going to work. So she says, okay, I'll find you a Bible dictionary. I said, y'all got them? She said, well, they're out there, but we don't have one. But I'll have to find one and see if someone will donate it to the jail for you. And I said, okay. Well, the next night, about the same time, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, I get woke up again. I go to the bars again, and there's nobody. I look back, there's the feet. And he starts talking to me. And this time, he starts telling me things in my name. He calls me out in my right name. He says, Shellie Renee. My middle name is spelled R-E-N-A. Most of the guards said Rena, Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? And he's like, starts saying, I am. I said, you am what? What are you talking about? And I said, what is your name? If you're going to be down here with me, we going to be friends. What is your name? He said, I'm Jesus. And I said, Jesus?
I said, well, that's not a bad name, I'm Spanish. That's like Jesus in my world, okay, you be Jesus. He goes, no, Jesus. And I just listen, but my heart, my demeanor is not being defiant no more. I'm feeling relaxed like I was whenever I was being coddled. And that smell comes back. And I'm like getting all into the smell of those sugar cookies, fresh baked sugar cookies. I mean, it's what it smelled like to me. And so I'm getting all calm and serene. And then all of a sudden he says, let me show you. I know you. And it felt like a Viewmaster being put on my face. And it would click, and each picture would show me happy times in my life that I had been crushing down with all the bad stuff that had happened to me. All those bad feelings, all the feelings of the cops and the rejection and the abuse and all. These were the good times that I had forgotten. I had smashed them down, with all the bad stuff, in my gut. And I started crying, and I started saying, I said, I don't want to be mad no more. I don't want to be like that no more. And I just started crying, and I started naming off every sin I ever did. And I mean, it was just like coming at me, like flowing like water. And he, at the end, I was sitting there, and it feels like I just took a shower, like I just got out of the water, like I went down in the water and came back up. I mean, I'm wet, my shirt is wet, my clothes are wet, my hair is wet. And he tells me, he says, now forgive my father. And I said, forgive your father? Who's your father? He says, God. I said, what am I mad about God? And the Viewmaster clicks again, and that's what I call it, a Viewmaster. It's what it felt like. My eyes would click, open and close, and real fast. And then there was this scene when I was 5 years old. My mom and dad lived out here. Well, we all lived out here in Cut and Shoe, Texas. And we took care of Homeward Treadway's horses. And he boarded a lot of race horses and stuff. And us kids, our jobs was to put them on the walker and to clean out their stalls and all that. My daddy and mom was supposed to be doing it for rent, but they sent us kids to go do it before school. Well, my little defiant self went down there and got the coffee can out of the sweet feed and decided I was going down to the horse pond, and I caught me a minnow, however you want to say it. And we took it back up to that house real proudly. My mama told me, she said, go put it back in that pond. That little fish is going to kick the bucket while you at school, and you need to go put it back where it belongs. Go put it back where it belongs. And I said, no, I knew a little bit about Sunday school. I'd been to a couple vacation Bible schools. I said, God will save him. And I went to school and left the coffee can on the porch. When I came home from that school right down here in Cut and Shoe, a little elementary, is it Anderson or I think, the coffee can was gone. And I'm like 5 years old, 6 years old at the time, and I'm mad at my mom. And I go in there and I tell her, where's my coffee can? She said, that fish kicked the bucket. I said, what? Said it died and kicked the bucket. I threw the can away. Now I got to find another can for the sweet feed. And I said, how could you do that to my fish? How could you do that? I seen my little 5-year-old self yelling at my mom, and I was like, I'm so sorry, God. I'm sorry. I'm not mad at you no more. I'm not mad at you. And I start crying all over again. And I said, see what you did? You made me cry. And he said, now you have someone else you're mad at. And I said, who? Who are you talking about now? Who's now? He said, you. You've been so mad at you for so long, because nobody has helped you, and you have been lost. He said, but I have been with you every step of the way. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I was barely even met you, and he said, I will reveal to you. Just believe me. So after that incident, I fell asleep. And the next morning I woke up. I was supposed to go to court, right? Court inside the jail, where they still shackled you up like you're going out of the jail, but it's in the jail. And so Miss Anderson comes to get me up, and the floor is wet, and I'm wet, and at some point I guess I had my towel on the floor trying to dry it up before she got in there, and I fell asleep. And she said, seriously, what happened to your floor? Why is it all wet? I said, I don't know. And, and I'm trying to lie because I ain't trying to tell her I'm talking to a ghost all night. You decoy ghost. And so she said, Searcy, She says, I'm calling the plumber to go check the pipeline. So he checked the pipeline. In the meantime, she got me a mop bucket with a trustee, which was my niece, Shoshana. And Shoshana brought me in the mop bucket. She goes, Aunt Shellie, what happened in there? I said, oh, Shauna, I can't tell you. And then she gave me the clothes, and Anderson told me, she said, go ahead, put on the clothes. Hurry up. We got to get you to court. But before I went to court, the last thing I remember God saying was, Jesus said to me, I'm going to give the judge a number in his head, and that's the number of years you're to do in jail. Are you willing to do that for me? And I told him, yes. So as I was putting on my clothes, I remembered, oh my God, my sentence is 5 to 99. I'm starting to get sick to my gut. I'm fixing to go down. I told him, and I told him, I said, you got to be with me the whole step. He said, I'll never leave you. And so when we get in there, of course, I'm late. So I'm the only girl left. And all the guys are going up there, and finally Mason Martin, we're in his courtroom now because my co-defendant Michelle Heimrich was on drug court with him, which she failed, being caught up on a drug scene with us, and 'cause she got arrested too. And so they already signed for time. They were begging me with sending kites under the doorways through the jail to get to me, telling me to just go ahead and tell them who the real dealer was. I wouldn't tell them who the real dealer was. They never found that little pack of dope I threw in the car. And so the sentence was 28 grams of dope, the dope that Summerall had that Heinrich brought. And I would never tell them who the actual drug dealer was, and neither did they. So we didn't rat on each other, but Summerall she comped to the bags in the dope, and she got manufacturing and delivering. I got facilitator delivery, of a controlled substance. I was the middleman. I wasn't even the boss girl. I was the middle. They called me the middleman. And then we had the driver, Michelle. So we all got the same drug charges, the same amount of dope. And so I go in front of Mason Martin now. Between D'Amico and Mason Martin, we had to go to another judge because apparently when we got to the substation, us three ladies, the two behind us from Willis, we all got paddy wagoned to Montgomery County Jail, right? In the same buggy. They put our cases together. So it took 3 months of getting our cases back from federal because they crossed Louisiana state line, so it made it federal with their dope cells. And now they thought we were all together, but we wasn't. We were two different apprehensions. And so we had to get off and away from them. So we had to wait for their felony cases to be over in Louisiana and Texas before we got to go to court. In the meantime, my lawyer's not showing up for none of my court cases. I'm going to jail I'm going to court every month now. And before I left out of the jail to go down to talk to Judge Mays, Miss Henderson stops me. And she says, seriously, what really happened here last night? And I said, Miss Anderson was over the Christian programs. I said, Miss Anderson, last night, me and Jesus was talking. She said, who? I said, Jesus. She said, seriously, you talking to Jesus? I said, I told him everything bad I ever did, and I cried, and I guess that's where the water come from. She said, seriously, that was a lot of water. I said, I know. I told him everything, Miss Anderson. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being a fighter. I don't want to fight people no more. I don't want to live like my daddy made me live. I don't want to live scared. I don't want to live like that no more. And I told him I'm sorry. And I told God I'm sorry for being mad at him. And I'm sorry for the way I treated you before. She's like, seriously, what are you talking about? And she says, come on, just get to court. So we get to court, and there's still some men left. And Judge Mays pulls me up there, and he says, Miss Searcy, he says, you're late to my courtroom. He says, I understand something about you were up last night praying. And he's kind of snide looking at me on the camera. And I look at him, and I said, yes, sir. I said, I was surrendering everything I ever did to Jesus. He said, who? Put his glasses down like that. Who did you say? I started to get queasy in my stomach, and I said, Jesus. He said, Miss Searcy. And he looks at the lady next to him, and he says, and I don't know that she's probation, but I can't do probation no more because I already made her mad before so she ain't gonna do no probation on me. And I looked at him and I said, Judge Mace, I said, look, I said, I am so sorry that I am making you go through these court proceedings with me. I'm sorry I was ever in this jail. And I just start repenting right there in front of him. And I said, and I told Jesus this all night long. And Jesus told me he's gonna put a number in your mind, and that's the number of years I'm gonna do. Well, as soon as I said that, the whole room was quiet. Now you hear chains shackling. Everybody scoot back away from me like I'm fixing to be hit with a bolt of lightning. And the judge is going, hey, what's going on in the courtroom? What's going on in the courtroom? And he tells Miss Dana Bells is there. He tells her to get control of the courtroom, so she makes everybody quit moving so their chains will shut up. And he looks at me, and his glasses are still down. He said, Miss Searcy, you do realize your sentences 5 to 99 years. I could give you 99 years. You've never been to prison. I said, I know, sir. I said, but it's a deal between me and Jesus. He said, well, let me think about it. I said, okay. So I went out of the room. No decision yet for prison. About 10 and a half months into jail, Tucker Graves shows up, my lawyer. And he's known in the jail to free people that are drug dealers. He's known to be the drug dealer lawyer. Well, I tried to fire him because he wasn't showing up. Yeah. And Judge Mays was getting mad, but the DA wouldn't let me fire him. They wouldn't let me fire him, and give me another court-appointed lawyer. So I was kind of stuck with him. And then he shows up, and he brings his paper in this printer thing, this ink pad, and he goes, go ahead, fingerprint and all. And I said, the last thing I heard from him was he's going to give me 5 years. I said, did you get me 5 years? He said, I threw a fingerprint in on the paper. He said, no, I got you 8. Well, I started turning green because I didn't know about no 8 years. 8 years of penitentiary is a long time. And I just started getting real queasy and real green and, at the gut. And Judge Mays calls me up there, and he looks up and he says, oh, well, hello there, Tucker Graves. Did you finally find your way into my courtroom? He said, let me tell you something. I ought to hold you in contempt. He said, because you told my people here that you were on your way to this courtroom several times for this lady, and you never showed up. He said, then other times you never even showed up, didn't even say nothing, but you kept her on the roster. Why did you do that? He said, well, Your Honor, I ended up having a heart attack. So I took 3 months off. He said, you couldn't write her a letter? You couldn't write my court a letter? Nobody could tell us nothing? He said, I should have let her fire you. I said, I should have let her do. He said, but Miss Searcy, you know that agreement me and you made? And I look at him and I look at my lawyer. My lawyer looks back at me and says, I don't know about no agreement. He says, of course you don't, because you haven't been here. He said, Miss Searcy, I'm going to tell you that number. And then I'm going to tell you something after that. And I said, okay. He said, I'm going to give you 6. He said, did you sign anything? I said, yeah. He says, why are you looking like that? I said, because I think I'm going to throw up. He says, you're going to throw up because I'm going to give you 6 years? I said, no, because he made me sign on 8. He said, looked at that clerk next to me. He says, go get that paperwork and tear it up. He goes, no, seriously, you're doing 6. And I said, okay, thank you. And to this day, I have not got my court papers back that said that 6 on it, but I did 2 years in. I went to Marlin. Well, first I went to Hell's Kitchen. I went to Dayton and all, and that prison there is where you go for women go for diagnostics and for state jail. So you go TDC on one side, state jail on the other. And I mean, those girls ain't got no home cooking, so whatever they fix, you have to eat or you get nothing. And if you ain't got commissary like I didn't have, then you ain't got nothing. You better eat you some crickets. Well, I gotta tell you, Tyra, it was like this here. The whole way through jail, Jesus was with me. He was with me when I left out of Plain State, He gave me the gumption. We were on lockdown for 2 hours. For 2 weeks. But the girl who cleaned up the dorm got to take a shower every day. So I went to her and I asked her, I said, can I help you clean up? And she didn't have nobody ever ask her that. She looked at me like, well, I guess if you want to. So I when she swept, I grabbed the mop and went behind her and I cleaned up the dorm with her. And every day I got the shower. And then there was a girl in there. I was reading that Bible And this girl decided, she was a white girl, but she talked like she was a black girl, and she was from like Dallas area. Well, up above me on my bunks were two girls from Dallas area that were gang members, and they were always throwing up gang signs and all, and they were real loud, jumping on the bed and twerking and stuff. And I would just sit there with my Bible with toilet paper in my ears and try to comprehend what I was reading and studying, and I just laugh at them, because I told the girl, I said, you about to fall off that bed. And so this white girl she gets some bad news, and I'm reading the Bible, and I'm not even looking at her, and she comes over into my bed and starts trying to fight with me. Well, she didn't know what kind of fighter I was, and I ended up pushing her back in her bunk and ended up fighting with her. Well, the guards both pull us out into the rotunda, and they said, listen, this is the deal. We know she instigated it. We saw it on camera. But if you say that she beat you up, or you say that she caused the fight or whatever, and that there was a fight, then we put you both in SEG. I said, why do I go to SEG? They said, for your protection. Because we don't know who else in this jail she knows and who might come against you. That's how we handle it, because we have a lot of gang members in these jails. And so we got to put you separate too. I said, then I won't say nothing. So they moved her out of the dorm, put her in another dorm. And then it wasn't long after that, I went to the parole office, and the parole officer told me there was no way in hell she was going to give me a program. And then this other parole officer lady called me back in there and said, since it's your first time in jail, we're going to do an outpatient type jail. Where you're going to be in a halfway house, and you're going to have to report to this center, and you're going to have to go there and do whatever they tell you to do there for your time. I said, okay. Well, within 2 hours, they called me back in there, and that bus is loading, going out to the free world. And I'm excited, but I'm not on it. They tell me, no, seriously, they need to see you in pro office again. And I went in the pro office, and this lady said, I got you a program. You wanted a program. I got you a program. I said, okay. I said, I'm cool with it now. She goes, you're going to Lockhart, Texas. I said, where the hell is that? She said, you'll find out. So I went back to this, what they call the dog pound. It's just a cage, wrought iron bar cage. And I'm sitting in there with all these other girls with all their junk, they got all their commissary bags, all their, stuff. And I just got a bunch of books, you know what I'm saying? I just got me some books. That's all I got. In my little red bag, it's a potato sack bag, from getting potatoes out in the field. That's what they give you. And as we're going there, I noticed when they were loading us on the van, there were 10 of us, that the side of the van didn't say TDC. It said something telecommunications. And I just looked at it, and I was like, telecommunications, what is that? And so they load us in this van, and they're taking us, and we're going west. And we're going, and we're going, and we're going. And I could put my feet on the two rails in front of me, because we're all shackled up, shackles around our stomach, shackles around our arms, and we're shackled together. And we're shackled to the bars, right? So I lean up, and I look, and all I see is tumbleweed and cactuses, and these girls are all in there, and they're like, seriously, where we're going? And I get this fear that they're taking us to Mexico to shoot us for the federales. They're going to go bury us on the Mexico line, and I'm telling these girls this, and they're all panicky and getting crazy in the back, and then they bring us into this building, this like warehouse, and they back us into it, and we all get out. And as we're walking in, I'm thinking, ooh, this is one of the Mexican compounds. They put the Mexican people when they come over the border, and this is one of them, I bet. And they bring us in there, and they make us do the drop and squat and the search, but they're not like TDC. Mm-hmm. They're just like, just bend down, drop it like it's hot, And I'm like, what? Because that's not how TDC talks, I left TDC. They're rude. And so they just mediocrely look at us girls, and in comes my friend Larissa Fickle, and she's out now doing good, and got back with her family and kids. She's doing great. That time in Montgomery County Jail, during that time, a lot of people got saved. Toby McLaughlin does a survivors class. His wife works there as a guard, and she usually I seen her last time when I went up there to visit somebody. She was a visitation guard for the pods. But Toby McLaughlin was doing that, was being a cop on the Ironman race recently in the Woodlands, and he got ran over, and he was in the hospital for a while. But I've always wanted to get with him and tell him, because his class, survivors class, he took out demonic spirits. He was one of them people. He said, you never have to talk loud to the spirits. They're always trying to listen. And he would whisper something, some godly words, and these girls' bodies would you could just see the demons coming out. And this little Spanish girl named Kit Cavan, she's still my friend. She started, she was like a lesbian, and she started tripping out. And she was like, where's it going to go if it comes out? And I'm like, put your hands up and say, it's going back to hell. Because that's what God told me to do. He told me to raise your hands and say, go back to hell, go back to hell. So all the girls started saying, go back to hell, go back to hell. And the girl who, all these demons, it was like 7 or 11 demons came out of this girl. She is still my dear friend this day. Wow. And that's Michelle and Serta, I think I said her name right. She was in Renew Church with us, Michelle. She was one of my biggest prayer warriors with me, because Toby McLaughlin delivered her from like 11 demons. I mean, we saw her body pop in places where it ain't supposed to bend. I mean, we saw this coming out of her. And on to this day, girl, she is still inspiring people on TikTok and on Facebook and all. She's learned how to be one of those people that can do the rocks on your back, or they talk about getting you healed, spiritually. What people don't understand, that I want to emphasize is a lot of people say, don't go back to your past. But you can't make your past right in your heart and in your soul unless you go back to it and take back what the locusts ate. Okay? You got to go get back what the devil took from you. If that's your childhood or whatever. The first time I came out of here and went to Caney Creek Cowboy Church, where I attend now, and Pastor Mark said something funny, and I laughed. I heard my 5-year-old child laugh for the first time. And then going to that church, I met Miranda and Brandon Phipps, and I told them, why was they going all the way to the Philippines for missionary work? Why didn't they start it right there? Grangerland needed the most. East Montgomery County needed the most. We needed the most. We had the most demonic people out here you ever seen us stuck off on drugs. And Lake Conroe area too, and Willis too, Calvary Road, all out down there, it's all ate up. Walnut Cove, all that's ate up with dope, still to this day. And I told him, I said, we need you here. And he started a Bible study class. And it was just a Bible study with Tony Evans. He would show us on the big screen, Tony Evans talking. And I like that man. I like the way he talked, because not only my kid sister Belinda has a 9th grade education, or 5th grade. I forget which one. But she can't really read the Bible like that. She doesn't receive the Bible by reading it. But when she went to Tony Evans, she could understand, because he was like talking to you through the screen. And so so the Bible started resonating with her. And in September 19, let me tell you, when I came home from prison, I was supposed to come home January 16th. Hell froze over in Texas. I mean, literally, it froze in Texas. We had the big freeze out where you couldn't drive nowhere. So my mom and them couldn't come get me from Gatesville, and I couldn't ride a bus to Houston or nothing, And in TDC, if they let you out on the weekend, they're responsible for you till you go to parole, So they wasn't going to have that. So they sent me back to my cell. My cell on the, I was at, in Gatesville at the trustee camp. God put me through all trustee camps. God put me in the ministry department at Lockhart, where I helped set up the chairs, for the inmates to sit in, and I set up the chords like you got here, but for them to play the instruments and the speakers and stuff. And then afterwards, what it was I kept helping them put up the chairs, and the guards were afraid I was going to get caught and count, so they told me to put in an I-60 form, to the ministry department to see if I could come work for them, so I wouldn't get caught and count, because I was doing God's work. God told me to carry the chairs, put them up. Pick the chair up. I picked the chair up. These sounds were audible. He was audible to me, and he was walking with me all the way through jail, everywhere. And I would talk to girls on the courtyard and stuff. I'd do Zumba with them and stuff, and I'd be talking about Jesus to them and stuff. And girls were coming to me, and the only class I could get into when I got there at the time was a Jehovah's Witness, and man. I had King James Version Bible. I come toting off in there. I was so excited. And they showed you videos, and that gave me a life of what this looked like in the Bible world. So now I have an image of that. So I didn't mind going to their classes. But there were certain words in their Bible that was different from my Bible, and I would question them about it. And then I would question the guy all about it. And he would teach me. And it carried on over to Marlin, to my program, my FI6R program. And when I got there, I wasn't on their ministry team, and all yet. And so I was there for my program, and the lady in my program, I'm telling you what, she was a psychologist or somebody like that, and she had this bad crush on Whitney Houston. She even had the blonde Whitney Houston, curls. She had those tie-on nails, she come in there with them, the big old flashy dresses, that had the hang out. And we could hear her coming down the hall, click, 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 with those heels. And every morning, my job was to clean the dorm and the bathrooms and the showers before I got dressed and went to school. So, of course, I'm going to do it because I'm going to get the first shower in the morning so I can go to class. Well, I have to get up at 3:30 to get clothes. I have to be at the pill line by 4. I have to be in the cafeteria by 4:30 to eat. And then by 5 o'clock, they're going to bring between 5 and 7, depends on how many guards they have. They bring my mop bucket to me. So then I can clean the day room first, and then I walk backwards to the bathrooms. Because you don't want to use the same rag from the toilet on the tables. I'd be real strict with the girls that try to help. No, if you just had that in the bathroom, you leave that in the bathroom. We'll just use this one. Because, that's how you learn. That's how you train somebody. Home training is you do, you don't wipe this part down here to get to this part. You go here down, Same way in the kitchen. You go kitchen, living room, and then backwards, And I'd make my bed real quick, and I'd be in that line every day, and those guards were watching me doing it. Well, the strings on the mops were hideous. So it was more like when you mop, the metal hit the concrete floor, and it scraped the concrete floor. And no matter how I tried to daub it or whatever to mop through, these people who were up all night long when they were supposed to be sleeping because they're in this program, in this class, they're supposed to be doing things to change their life, and instead they're still reprobated. And I'm the only one going to church, but I pray for every one of those girls on those beds. Every one of them come to me at some point or another, and I got to pray with them. I got this one girl that was Muslim, and she had to pray to the east. So she wanted to come and kneel down on the floor right there by my bed and pray to her God to the east. And I told her, I said, okay, let me ask my God. So I went back and I prayed under the covers, pulled on my head that morning. And I prayed, and God said, let her. So I said, okay. So while she was down there praying on her little prayer roar, I was praying to God up here. Guess what happened? Before we left that program, she turned Christian. Because my God's east too, you know what I mean? We're both on the east side. But I was sitting there, and that lady just did not like me because I was Christian, because I was going with the Bible. She didn't like me. She didn't like me at all. And Tyra, she was really mean to me and everything. She went around the room and she was asking people with this thing, once an addict, always an addict. And God said, no, you're not. You're redeemed. That's what he whispered in my ear. So when she got to me, she said, "Oh, Searcy, Miss Bible Thumper, what do you got to say?" And I said, raised my hand. She said, "What?" I said, "Let me move my seat back. Can I stand up for this one?" And she says, "Why?" I said, "Because I don't want lightning to hit nobody else." And she just looked at me. She said, "Seriously, for real, what do you got to say?" I said, "Well, you got a book on your desk that says once an addict, always an addict. I got a book on my desk that's wrote by God that says I am redeemed. I am delivered from being a drug addict, and I'm not going to let nobody tell me that I'm not." And so I believe in my book that I am redeemed and delivered from drug addiction, from cigarettes, from being a self-centered woman. And I just started nailing it all because the Holy Spirit was working through me and telling me this. When I got through, she just looked, and her wig was trying to come off a little bit. I knew she was shaking her head the whole time I was saying all those words. And then she straightened it back up, and she sat down. She said, "Ooh, girl, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. I don't know what I'm going to do with you." But then she took me back into the office part of her room, and she was in my face. You know, you're not supposed to touch them.
Right.
And my hands started balling up in a fist, and she was yelling and spitting in my face when she talked, you know, and telling me, "You think you're a smart aleck, and you think you're this, and you think you're that." And Jesus told me before in a story I read that the devil will come with gnashing teeth.
Yeah.
And when they come with gnashing teeth, all you got to do is call out the name of Jesus. And so in my head, I was going, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." And I heard him say, "Let your fingers loose." I said, "What?" He said, "Your fingers are in a ball. Let them loose." And I loosened my fingers. I didn't realize I was in fight mode. Flight or fight, you know, is what they say. I was in fight mode. I was fixing to do something, and God knew it, and he come in there. And whatever I did, when I opened my eyes, whatever she seen, she leered back. She walked back 2 feet. She said, "You need to get away from me." And I went back in the room, and all the people heard it. And I had tears in my eyes. I started crying because I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. And that night, I didn't even go to dinner. I just laid in my bed under the covers and cried. And I said, "God, I did what you told me to do. I did what you told me to do." And man, the next morning I got up to clean, and everybody got the commissary, and the mop scraped the floor, and everybody got up screaming and yelling at me that I was, "You doing that on purpose," and this and that. And she come walking in the room, and she's like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And they started telling her, and God told me, "Be quiet." He said, "You be quiet." And I remember when the light came on that the devil kept hissing, and God didn't say a word, and it fought the devil back. So I remember, "Be quiet." And she started yelling and screaming in my face and telling me all this and that. And the guards were listening to her, and I could see the guards bundling up together in the hallway like they were expecting a fight or something. And I kept watching them through the door. And I sat at my little table with my little Bible, because after I did my studying or while I was waiting for the mop bucket, I had my Bible, and it was a life recovery Bible, you know, that talks, it's for people that have addictions, and I was reading it. So everybody starts going off on me, saying I deliberately was doing this and that and waking them up and all while they were trying to sleep. And I could have told off on them and said that they got commissary last night. They were up all night long, jumping from bunk to bunk playing. But my job was to clean them. I could have spoke up. But the more I tried to talk, the more my words just wouldn't come out. And she said, speak to me. Why won't you talk to me? Are you being defiant? You're doing it on purpose. You're not talking to me." And I could just see her. And the voice came back saying, "Look at the gnashing teeth. Never forget the gnashing teeth of the devil. You know, never forget what that looks like. That you don't ever have to fight. I'm here with you. Don't say nothing, because I'm watching her and I'm watching you." I said, "Okay, Jesus, I'm not going to say." She goes, "What'd you say?" Because I was mumbling to Jesus. I said, "I wasn't saying anything to you, ma'am." By that time, the guard opens the door and says, "Searcy, come out here in the hall." So I came out in the hall, and she said, "Look, we've been listening. And I'm going to tell you what. She can't kick you, because she was telling me she's going to kick me out of my program. Make me go back to TDC somewhere and do the rest of my 6 years somewhere. I'm kicking me out of my class." She said, "She can't do that to you. Don't let her do that to you." And so I went to my class, and I got pulled out, and she got pulled out, and a guard came in to take her place. And they had a guard walking with me, and they had her walking by herself up ahead. And we got in there, and it was in where the warden is, in it's a big oval table, and they got me sitting in a chair like this. And she's sitting there all prim and proper in there, right next to the assistant warden. And the warden's sitting there looking at me, and he says, Miss Searcy, can you tell me what's going on in your class? And I look at him, Tyra, and I say, we're not allowed to snitch in prison. He looked at me, he said, okay. He said, I respect that. He said, well, I'm going to ask your teacher what's going on. And see, all the guards went to him and told him. And while she was yelling at me in that room and I wasn't saying nothing, he was watching on camera. Wow. So she starts talking. And she starts telling him that I was being defiant. I wouldn't answer her questions. And he said, Miss Searcy, why didn't you answer her questions? I said, because Jesus told me not to. He told me he'd fight my battle. All I had to do was stay quiet. Mm. Wow. The warden went, oh, okay. Okay, that's a different light right there. And he says, Miss Searcy, going back to your classroom. He said, before you do, he said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, I've been up all night long on phone call after phone call from people's ministers. I don't know who you are, but everybody in that dorm down there for your class has had their family members calling their preachers. And all the preachers are calling me wanting to know why I am being harassed being the Christian girl in the classroom. Why are they harassing the Christian girl? And I just start looking at him and I'm smiling. And, I didn't have very many teeth, but I said, thank you, sir. And I start crying. He says, you go on. I'm going to talk to Miss, I think her name was Miss, I can't believe it. It's Miss Ward or something. And whenever we went to graduate, this lady came in and she'd been a prostitute for a long time. She wrote a book. She'd been jailed like 28 times or something for prostitution and all. But she got clean and sober. Now she was trying to open up. She's famous. She's trying to open up halfway houses or houses for women that's been in prostitution to get them off the street and to get them, with their families and stuff and all. And get them set up in houses and stuff and teach them the Bible and stuff. And so I'm watching her in our graduation class, and we're sitting there and I'm watching her, and after she gets through talking, the warden talks to us for a minute, and then he tells us that this TDC, straight up TDC, and then he tells us that Marlon, he tells us, to come up and get our diplomas. Well, I'm so overwhelmed with gratitude from God that I made it that far, that when I got up there, I grabbed that poor lady and I gave her a hug when she gave me my diploma. And then I let go of her and I went and I hugged everybody else, all the other guards, even the lady that was the thing. And then when I got to the warden, I grabbed his hand, I shook him, I said, thank you, sir. And I had tears in my eyes. I went back, sat down, and the little girl next to me said, Searcy. So what? She said, I was so happy, my little certificate. She said, Searcy, she said, you just hugged everybody in TDC, even the Wyndham teacher, the teacher over all the classes, And she said, you're not supposed to touch nobody in TDC. I said, I don't care. I got out of this class. That's all I care about. I don't care where they send me next. I know Jesus is with me. I know he'll never leave me or forget me. And he didn't. And when I left there, I went to Gatesville to the trustee camp there. And I was praising and worshiping loud, and I was dancing and clapping. And the guard called me over, this lady guard, and she started reprimanding me, telling me that I could not do that, And I'm just looking at her going, I'm just praising God, And she's like, all these other guards are coming in, and I'm getting kind of scared now that, I didn't do anything, And then she calls for the warden to come down there and talk to me. I didn't even know this lady. I've been to church many times before she got there that morning and all. And the judge come in, he said, was she causing a riot? I mean, not the judge, the warden. And the lady says, no. He says, everybody in here, was she causing a riot? And they said, no, she was just praising and worshiping God, clapping her hands. He said, there's no rule against that in TDC. Go on, girl. Praise your Jesus. And we turned around and walked out. And I said, oh my God, so see God work for me again. But when it came time for me to come home and hell froze over, I had to go back to my dorm, do that walk of shame. And I walked in there, dragging my little book bag, and they put me right back in the same, I was in cubicles now over there, not rooms, but cubicles. And they put me in there, and the guard walks down there with me too to sign the book, sign it in. And the little girl in there cubicle next to me, every time we had shower duty, duty to clean the bathrooms, I always told everybody to go ahead and stay. I would do them by myself. They say, why? I said, because it's my time with Jesus away from everybody. Outside, playing volleyball, that's my time with Jesus, And so I'd wash and scrub the toilets. I'd be on my hands and knees, girl, getting all the way around that toilet, just talking to Jesus about what I was studying in the Bible or praying for family. And then names would come to my head, and I'd be praying for them from the girls that I left back in, the county jail before I got TDC. And I just prayed. This one girl named Chi, she got caught up being one of those, massage parlor girls and all, and they were going to exile her back to China and all. And I would think about her often because angels were walking around her all the time, and she don't believe in angels. Their culture don't believe in Jesus. And I would tell her, gee, like that. And when we got in TDC, we were walking in lines away from each other, and she seen me, and she got so excited. She goes, Searcy, Searcy, Searcy. She'd do the angel thing, and I'd do the angel thing, and the guards would say, y'all stop. Stand in line, walk straight. And we just, and every prison I went to, she went there. Then I found out they didn't exile her. She even got out the year after I got out. But
So tell me now, you did your time and you came home. What are you doing now?
now I am still praising God. I'm a Jesus freak. I can't help it. I ain't ashamed of it, I pray for people that are homeless wherever I see them, I'm borrowing someone's car right now, so they prefer me not to drive up to them and pray with them because they're afraid I might get robbed or they might get stolen. And I understand that and all right now because my car's broke down. Beryl, the hurricane tore up my trailer, so I got a tarp on it. But I'm praying for a roofer. I'm praying for a mechanic for my car, because God gave me both of those. And I told him before he gave me those, I said, "Well, don't give me a car or a house because I can't do the maintenance, sir." But God still gave them to me. And everywhere I go, from the hospitals to anywhere I go, I smile and I tell people I love them, and I pray with them whenever they'll let me and all. I love giving hugs. I'm the biggest church hugger. Let me tell you something. One time, my Pastor Mark approached me and told me, "You can't just go up and just be hugging on everybody, Shellie, because some people don't know how to take you. We know how to take you. We know you on fire for the Lord. We know that you're sold out. But some of these people, they're new, so they don't understand this. So it may scare them off from church." And I looked at him, I said, "Well, if they get scared off that easy, then they really wasn't going to be here anyway that long." And he just looked at me. And then another time, some of the elders back when I first started, thought my hallelujah, because it's real loud. I got a loud scream and shout for the Lord, just like for Jericho. I'm a Jericho shouter, and I didn't. It's something I can't help. It's something it's the Holy Spirit. It comes through and it just hits me, especially during music.
Okay, now I want you to send everybody off and give them your bless them as they go forward and heard your story.
Oh, so you want me to pray, huh?
Not necessarily pray, but I want you to bless them. I want you to send them off and thank them. And, I hope that you heard my story and something resonated, or just kind of send them off to close out the whole thing.
Well, I do.
I tell you what, Shellie, your story has been amazing, and it's been a blessing to spend this time with you, to create this. The scripture that kind of pops in my head, and I don't remember the exact verse, but it's the picture of the woman coming to Jesus and dumping the mirth on his feet and cleaning his hair with her tears and hair and everything. And Jesus says, those that have been forgiven much loves much.
Yes.
And when I first met you years ago during COVID, that's what I saw. A
Yes.
woman that loved much. And you're still out there loving. And but from hearing your story, you've been forgiven much.
Yes.
And we all are. And grace, sanctification, justification, you've learned it.
You know, I I was questioned whenever I got out. Where did I learn what I learned? Because pastors were telling me that they learned this stuff when they went to Bible college, and I didn't have no Bible college. I came out penitentiary. I said, Jesus, where'd you learn yours? You know, it was just genuine and all. And I just want to thank you and thank everybody for listening to my story. You know, if you can identify with it, you know, that warms my heart because I do want everyone to be helped. I want everybody to be saved. I want you to be saved, and I want you to be able to go back to where you were hurt and say, God, I don't want to be hurt there no more. I want you to take that from me. I want you to take that seed, you know, learn to be pluckers and growers and harvesters, you know, and harvest your life back to yourself, you know, and a lot of people, they don't know how to do it, but I'll tell you how you do it. You start off by surrendering. And that is a surrendering that is contrite. Means you do it with all of your heart. You don't hold nothing back. You don't care about who hears it. Your devil can never shame you again. The Lord told me, once I tell my story, the devil can never shame me again. And he carries that with me in my heart every day, everywhere I go, no matter what people say about me or do. I just keep saying, you can't shame me. Devils can't shame me because I'm a child of God, and so are you. And I pray in my name, in his name, not my name. I pray in his name that that everyone has a contrite heart and comes to him because he is gracious. He is merciful. And learning to forgive yourself is very important because that's how you're going to learn how to love yourself. All the love that I got, I never got as a child. I didn't get hugs. My parents didn't do that to me. You know, I didn't get a lot of love from the boyfriends like I should have gotten, you know. But with my Father up above, you know, his Son has shown me how to love like a dear friend, how to love like a father, how to love like a spiritual being and all. And it's carried me. It's helped me. It's grown me. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. This isn't my testimony. It's Jesus' testimony about me. It's his story about me because I didn't do none of this myself. And I am so grateful because I'm still out here 8 years later. And I'm still drug-free, alcohol-free, self-free, cigarette-free, man-free. I'm still living for the Lord, being celibate, you know, because I believe that he is the one to take care of me. And, you know, the Bible says, you may suffer for a little time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just for a little time.
Mm-hmm.
So with my house being like it is, and my car being broke down, my house being tore up, I still believe that what I got inside is so precious because God gave me all of it. He gave me all my journals, all my books, my dog, my cat. He gave me all that stuff. You know, it says in there that he will give you 10 times more than what you lost.
Yeah.
And one time I used to pray because I collected little perfume miniature bottles. And Jesus, I was getting mad at County Jail. And Jesus said, gotta let that go. If you want me to heal you, you got to let everything you got in that game, everything you got in that life, you got to let it go. Can't hold on to nothing. One little video piece is one window for the devil, so you got to let it all go. Mm-hmm. I said, they were just jewelry bottles, they're just little bottles. He said, you got to let it go. Mm-hmm. And so now I tell myself, like every year, you know, I try to purge stuff out of my house. I say, you got to go so God can give me more. I got to go. You got to go now, you know, and all. But I'm always here praying with people. Matter of fact, I'm a prayer partner with On Point Rescue, and they even put prayer warrior in big letters on the back of my shirt. I was going to wear it today, but then I thought maybe I'd wait. But On Point Rescue, they go and save people. They've been blessed with lifeboats to go and help rescue people in floods and stuff, and from Burrow and stuff. And they've gotten people to donate water and food and stuff and all, and they've given it out, you know, with the God buckets and all. And the God bucket, there for hurricane, prevention. It's got a towel and a Bible in it and a flashlight. It's got some things in it for you in case you're in a hurricane and all. And I've been with them ever since they were just the husband and the wife doing it. Now we've got many prayer partners and stuff.
So, are you on social media?
I'm on Facebook.
You can follow Miss Searcy on Facebook at
Shellie Searcy. There's many of me, but you got to look for the one. I believe I have. Let me see which one I have on there. Let me see. Hang on 1 minute. Let me see here. Facebook. Oh, it's got. I don't know if I bring that up. No. Let me see here. It's got Shellie Searcy, and then it's got a lion, the Lion of Judah, and the Jewish candle holder in the background. But it's this one right here. I don't know if you can see or not. But it's Shellie, Shellie, Searcy, Searcy. And I'm going to see if I can, that profile picture. Because I got some other ones on there from back when I was in my drug days.
We'll just put that on there. We'll flash it across the screen.
Yeah.
But we want to thank you for watching an episode of a rewritten story, the Shellie Searcy story.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again. Share this out.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Excuse me. Start coughing.